People in the U.S. consume around 100 acres of pizza every day, which is almost the size of Vatican City. Also, they drink 146 billion cups of coffee a year. Now, with that amount of coffee, you could fill an average-sized lake in approximately 10 years. But you couldn't fill Lake Superior because it has enough water to cover the whole U.S. with 1 foot of liquid. Now, people in the U.S. generally don't live in rural states like Wyoming, and because of that, more people live in New York than in 39 out of 50 states of the U.S. At the same time, Wyoming is the 10th largest state in the U.S. It's bigger than the UK, but it's also the least populated state. You could drive through it for hours without seeing a single person. And because there's no strangers around, locals don't even lock their doors. Also, the whole state only has 2 escalators. Count them. Nestled within Wyoming's borders is iconic Yellowstone, the country's first national park. Now, living in Wyoming can be likened to playing a game on hard mode. It's one of the windiest and coldest states. The weather is genuinely wild, and it's not for everyone. There are also positive things about Wyoming, like its affordable stay and endless outdoor activities. It has a population of 576,000 people. That number of inhabitants could fill a small city. But everything you love about the outdoors can be found here, and that's why people choose this state. Vermont is the muddiest state in the U.S. It even has its own Loch Ness Monster. In the 17th century, European cartographer Samuel de Champlain reported seeing a 20-foot monster in Lake Champlain, named after him, that was as thick as a barrel and had a head like a horse. And since then, many more people have allegedly seen this creature. Vermont is an excellent state with tons of natural beauty. It's the perfect place for starting a farm. The state has a population of a little over 500,000 people. There are more folks in a few blocks in New York than the entire state of Vermont. It's a rural place, not ideal for building huge cities. But if you love farms and maple syrup, then Vermont is a haven for you. It produced over 2 million gallons of maple syrup in 2003. Vermont is also very cold, so people have invented snow golf. They would paint golf balls red and play in the winter on hard, icy snow. Now let's talk about the largest state in America, Alaska, the last frontier. This state is so big that it could fit 19 other states. But when it comes to population, Alaska could be doing a bit better. It has stunning natural beauty, like huge forests and lakes. At the same time, there's a lot of wildlife, which can sometimes be frustrating. Imagine sitting in your garden and getting visited by a grizzly bear or a wolf. Part of the problem is that the cities are too far apart. It's at least a 6-hour drive from one city to another. Still, if you love the outdoors, Alaska is the place for you. Plus, you get paid to live there. But there is a problem. As we all know, Alaska is not connected to the rest of the U.S., so most goods have to travel a long way, meaning everything is quite expensive there. And one of the biggest reasons people don't like living there is that it's freezing. You must shovel tons of snow just to get outside and do simple tasks. Around 700,000 people live in Alaska year-round. And if you ask them, they'll probably tell you that they like it there because there aren't many people around. When you think of South Dakota, the first thing that comes to mind is Mount Rushmore, and that is basically it. The state has a population of a little under 1 million and is practically empty. It has harsh weather and it's pretty far from everything. But the people of South Dakota are super friendly. If you go there, you'll feel welcome. Also, as with many other states, the beauty of nature might surprise you. North Dakota is similar to South Dakota, but a little more challenging than South Dakota. The state has tough winters, hot and humid summers, and no big cities. And if that wasn't enough, it also has a lot of floods. When people hear about this, they usually stay away, despite Dakota being a beautiful state. It has a population of 780,000 people, making it the 4th least populated state in the U.S. When settlers were moving there, only a tiny number of people remained in the end. Many moved to Canada, where farmland is better, thanks to better weather and more fertile soil. North Dakota has some unique benefits, like low cost of living and low unemployment rates. And if you are a nature lover, you won't be disappointed. It has 13 state parks and 3 national parks, all with fantastic scenery. Delaware is a small state with an even smaller population. The biggest city in Delaware is Wilmington, which has a population of 70,500 people. As for the whole state, it has around 1,031,890 people. It also has 2 million corporations, but no big cities. You may wonder about the reason. Well, they don't pay income taxes there, and those corporations are not actually located in Delaware, meaning that the local people there really don't benefit from them. The state is prone to storms. Philadelphia, which is close to Delaware, has fewer storms and is closer to major cities, so corporations simply move there. Most people who live in Delaware are retired. They don't need jobs, but love the fantastic beaches this state offers. Hey there, cowboy! We're going on a horse ride to the most beautiful state with teeming wildlife, which houses one of the best national parks, Glacier. Of course, I'm talking about Montana. This state has a little over 1 million people and is bigger than Japan in territory. But Japan has around 111 times more people than Montana. Why? Well, most people don't want to be cowboys. Generally speaking, people tend to like living in big cities, which Montana doesn't have. Plus, Montana has tough winters and expensive houses. And people don't like being cold. That's why Florida has so many people. Rhode Island has a population of a bit over 1 million, making it the 8th smallest state in the USA. Rhode Island is a small, flat coastal state. If you climb on a chair, you might see the whole state. Just kidding, you can't do that. By territory, it's the smallest state in the US, but it's densely packed with people. At the same time, the inhabitants of this state are gradually leaving it. The cost of living there is high, so they would rather go somewhere more affordable. Now let's say you're from Canada. In this case, if you accidentally teleported to Maine, you wouldn't even notice it, because the landscape would look almost the same. Maine has beautiful lakes, mountains, dense pine trees, and many moose. If you see one, stay away. Maine is truly a beautiful state, but it has a small population of around 1,300,000 people. Maine has terrible winters, so almost everyone lives near the coast or as far south as possible to escape crazy snowstorms that are common here. Because of this, 89% of Maine is covered with forests. This is one of the reasons why there aren't many industries here. Portland is the biggest and most beautiful city in this state, but only around 38% of the population lives in cities. Most inhabitants of the state are avid outdoor lovers. You'd be surprised to find out the life-changing discoveries a person can make just by browsing Google Maps. Like this guy, who found a suspicious crater and might have made a major scientific discovery. In 2024, Canadian Joël Lupoint was planning a casual camping trip in his homeland. He opened Google Earth and zoomed in Quebec's Côte-Nord region. That's when he saw it, this unusual rounded structure. The measurement was impressive, 9.3 miles from one point to another, and there seemed to be a lake next to it. He was quick to print the screen and sent the image to a French geophysicist to see if he knew anything about it. Most times these images turn out to be nothing, or simply Google Earth watermarks. But he was surprised when he opened his email and saw the scientist's reply. The geophysicist said that, judging by the looks of the topography, Lapointe could have discovered a meteor impact area. Now, impact areas are really hard to identify. Since they've been around for millions of years, most of their shapes have been heavily changed by erosion. Scientists call these areas impact structures. They're usually circular or crater-like and are made up of deformed bedrock. It happens when a meteor falls into the surface of the Earth. Here's the thing. Since the crater has huge walls around it, these areas are usually mistaken for mountain ranges. That's what left the Canadian explorer confused. But the French geophysicist that analyzed the case gave him hope. That weird formation in Quebec had been classified as a type of volcanic formation. After Lapointe brought this subject back to the agenda, scientists had to dig a little deeper to find the truth. Until this recent discovery, Scientists thought the area looked like that due to some volcanic formation. This is actually normal, since other things such as volcanism and sinkholes can be mistaken for impact craters. To verify, they asked for some samples of the site. This is a more reliable way to fact-check whether a meteor landed there or not. When the meteor hits the Earth, it brings different types of minerals from outer space. That's the wonderful thing about impact craters. They reveal a link between Earth and the outside universe. By now, scientists have cataloged most of the minerals that are native to our planet. When they're searching for an impact structure, they usually look for things such as teenite and chemisite, which can only be found in meteors. The biggest known impact crater in the world is the Vredefort crater, located in South Africa. This big thing was formed some 4 billion years ago. The asteroid that made it is estimated to have been one of the largest ever to strike planet Earth. When the researchers got the results of the site back in Canada, they did confirm that it contained zircon, a mineral that tends to show areas of impact. There's no way to guarantee that LaPointe really found an impact crater, but scientists are organizing a research mission over to the area just to make sure. If it turns out that it really is an impact crater, that's pretty huge news, since the last discovery was made in 2013. Another one of these mesmerizing discoveries came from a 15-year-old boy. William Goddery was also a Canadian, and for some reason loved looking for long-lost Mayan cities. Different from the previous story, William had an intention and a research methodology. He had studied many books on Mayan civilizations. He believed that Mayans built their cities in relation to the stars in the sky. So he opened a book and mapped all the cities that have already been unearthed. And that's when he noticed something important. There is an area in the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico where archaeologists have unearthed 2 Mayan cities. But on the constellation map, there are 3 stars. He thought to himself, could this mean there is a lost city waiting to be discovered nearby? William Goddery is known to be a science genius and has even won an award for this constellation theory. When he noticed that a 3rd city was missing from the 23rd constellation he was examining, he began to search Google Earth for satellite pictures that could help him solve this mystery. Advances in satellite tech have shed new light on long-lost Mayan cities such as Tikal. Located in the heart of the Guatemalan jungle, Tikal is believed to have been the capital of the ancient Mayan Empire. He had hopes, so he reached out to a friend inside the Canadian Space Agency to verify what he had found. Since he had already won awards for his research, he had friends in high places, and that's when things got interesting. According to the images, there was a large square area on the border of Mexico and Belize that looked like the remains of a city. William took the images to a remote sensing expert. They studied the images thoroughly and concluded that the area could be housing 30 buildings and even a large pyramid. William named the new city discovered as Mouth of Fire. However, his theory was very much contested inside the archaeological community, and many Mayan experts worked to debunk William's findings. Experts say that constellation theories are too unscientific. Renowned anthropologists and astronomers said William's methodology was an act of creative imagination. Still, a 15-year-old teen almost found a long-lost Mayan city, which is pretty exciting if you ask me. What about these tiny dots that appeared on images of Google Earth? These strange spotted circles were found in the middle of the Algerian desert. A YouTuber browsing on Google Earth found these circles and discovered that people had been debating over their origin for years. He thought they were a glitch from satellite images. There are dozens of them, stretching for miles and miles in a straight line. They're far away from any town, road, or human activity, making it hard to understand if it was man-made or just a natural phenomenon. To settle this mystery, he interviewed the people who took Google Earth's pictures. He found out they were 100% true. The circles were there in real life. They appear in multiple pictures from multiple years. Now, at first, he guessed they were the result of oil activity. Algeria is a rich area for natural resources, so this made sense. To find out if the area is worth extracting, companies usually undertake seismic surveys. They're a way of analyzing the Earth's surface by sending shock waves into the ground. Depending on how these waves bounce back, you'll know it is located underground. There was another possibility. The Sahara is a very dry area of the planet. The average high temperatures in summer are over 104 degrees Fahrenheit. To survive there, people need to find ways of accessing water. So, his second guess was that the circles were kind of ruin or leftover from ancient water wells. But when he talked to an expert, he found out they weren't ancient water wells. You can see some of these traditional constructions in other cities on Google Earth, and they look really different from the mysterious circles. He decided to travel over to Algeria to find out the truth. He drove 99 miles into the heart of the desert, and when he gets there, he sees it. A huge crater dug on the sand, surrounded by 12 smaller holes. It kind of looked like the ancestor of a modern clock. There, he found something he couldn't spot on Google Earth: thin metal wires. When the curious YouTuber and his teams started to dig in the sand, they found old dynamite and some sardine cans. Apparently, they were hiding the truth. The Sahara Circles, as they were famously called, were not the historical leftovers of seismic surveying. Back at the time when these circles were made, this technology didn't even exist, but they were sure related to oil exploration. The dynamite holes were an ancient method of oil searching, and the sardine cans? Well, they were left by the workers who were exploring the region. Another Google Earth mystery solved.
These dark patches on Greenland's ice sheet aren't just any old stains. Every summer, the ice, which is usually bright white, turns murky gray in certain areas. This so-called dark zone was a huge mystery for a long time, until some studies discovered that this weird transformation was connected to the odd appearance of red, green, and brown-colored algae. The scariest part is that this algae bloom keeps growing. The dark zone is getting darker, and terrifying microbes might start appearing. Now, the rest of the world should be concerned. The Greenland ice sheet is like a massive ice blanket that covers around 80% of the island. It's so thick that it holds about 8% of the world's freshwater ice. For most of the year, the ice looks like a giant untouched white sheet stretching over the land. But when summer rolls around and temperatures start to rise, things begin to change. The ice melts, revealing rocky areas along the coast. And as you move further inland, that once smooth white ice becomes darker. This is the dark zone, and it covers an area of around 248 miles in length and 62 miles at its widest point. This weird phenomenon happens basically for two reasons. The first one is black carbon. Just like dust that builds up on your bookshelf, the ice in Greenland has the same issue. The wind carries a mix of dust and soot to this icy area. But unlike your bookshelf, you can't just wipe it off with a cloth. In Greenland's case, this dirty mix settles on the ice and sticks around for thousands of years. So, the dark zone is basically covered in a fine layer of dust that's built up over time. Back in 2014, researchers analyzed this dirty mix and found that the darker ice areas were filled with black carbon. This black carbon didn't just appear out of thin air. Well, actually, it sorta did. Scientists believe it mostly comes from smoke produced by wildfires in northern Canada and Alaska somewhere in the past. As you might guess, black carbon is black, which is why it makes the ice look darker. Now, the second big reason for the Greenland ice sheet's summer makeover has to do with those algae we mentioned earlier. We're mostly talking about two types of it: the Ancylonema alaskana and the Ancylonema nordenskjoldii. Both of them love cold water regions. During winter, they stay in a dormant state deep within the ice. But when spring comes, they start to slowly migrate to the surface. By the time summer hits, they're ready to bloom and soak up nearly 24 hours of sunlight each day for photosynthesis and growth. Normally, these algae are green, but when exposed to sunlight, they turn brown as a natural way to protect themselves from harmful ultraviolet rays. And this color change is also what makes the ice in Greenland look darker. So far, this has been normal behavior. What's really alarming is that these algae blooms are getting bigger and bigger every year. This happens because they thrive on phosphorus, a nutrient that's plentiful out there and comes from a mineral called hydroxylapatite. This mineral is found in a type of rock that breaks down into tiny dust particles, which are then blown across the ice by the wind. As the climate gets warmer, the rocks dry out more, and stronger winds carry more dust. More dust means more phosphorus, leading to more algae growth. See? It is a cycle, and it keeps getting worse every year. Studying this is crucial to understanding why the dark zone keeps getting bigger. From the year 2000 to 2012, its size increased by 12%. But you might be wondering, why should we care? After all, it's just ice getting darker, right? Well, not exactly. Think about how you can't stand wearing black clothes on a hot, sunny day. They soak up the heat and make you feel even hotter. That's because darker surfaces absorb more sunlight. The same thing happens to ice. Together, dust, black carbon, and algae blooms are responsible for about 70% of the variability in albedo on the Greenland ice sheet. Albedo is just a fancy word for how reflective a surface is. If you take two surfaces, one white and shiny and the other dark and rough, the white one will reflect a lot of light and heat, giving it a high albedo. The dark one, on the other hand, will absorb more light and heat, so it has a low albedo. During the summer, the Greenland ice sheet experiences a reduction in albedo. This means the ice absorbs more sunlight, and when ice absorbs more sunlight, it melts faster than it should. This is why understanding what's happening in the dark zone is so important. It helps predict how quickly the Greenland ice sheet is melting and how it can affect the rest of the world. Greenland's ice sheet is the second largest in the world, covering an area about the size of all the land in the United States east of the Mississippi River. And its huge mass of ice averages a thickness of 1.4 miles. Unfortunately, the ice loss has skyrocketed. Back in the 1990s, Greenland was losing about 25 billion tons of ice per year. Now, it's losing around 234 billion tons per year. That's nearly 10 times more ice melting away each year. According to NASA, if all of Greenland's ice sheet were to melt, it would increase global sea levels by about 24 feet. That could be catastrophic for coastal countries and cities around the world. The Netherlands could be submerged, the Bahamas could be almost completely wiped out, and many of the Philippines Islands would be at risk of disappearing. All of this may seem like a distant reality, and it is true that most scientists believe it would take several hundred or even thousands of years for the ice sheet to melt completely. But it is important to know that Greenland didn't always have this thick layer of ice. Very recently, researchers took a close look at some sediment from the bottom of a 2-mile deep ice core extracted from the center of Greenland. They found that the soil had traces of willowwood, insect parts, fungi, and even poppy seeds. So these fossils are the first direct evidence that Greenland's ice sheet melted away in the recent geological past, around 400,000 years ago. At that time, Greenland was home to a green tundra landscape with insects and plants. This discovery is both fascinating and scary because it shows that the ice sheet collapsed before and might be more fragile than scientists originally thought. There is another concern too. A recent research collected meltwater from different spots on the Greenland ice sheet and found that the water samples were packed with hundreds and thousands of microbes. The concern is that they could be released into the ocean in the future. And some studies already suggest that areas near where a lot of glacial meltwater flows have a higher risk of viruses jumping to new hosts, like from animals to humans. Even though experts believe the chance of a doomsday virus coming from the glaciers is very small, it's still not zero. The truth is, we don't know much about the thousands of microbial species living on the surface of the ice, and there is simply not enough data to fully understand how dangerous these organisms might be. All of this might sound concerning, but we shouldn't panic just yet. There's still a lot we don't understand about what is darkening the Greenland ice sheet. We still need more detailed measurements of the relative abundance of dust, algae, and black carbon, as well as a better understanding of how these potentially dangerous microbes could affect our lives. The more we learn, the better we can predict what's going to happen and how we can prepare for it.
If you walk through this small stone doorway in Hierapolis, Turkey, you might never come back alive. Back in ancient times, people thought it was some sort of portal to the underworld. Romans would go in carrying perfectly healthy bulls, but after a few minutes, they would watch these animals collapse as if hit by some mysterious force. But what's even weirder is that nothing happened to people. They could walk in and out just fine. Now, recent studies might have an answer for these eerie happenings, and it all has to do with people's heights. The gate, known as Plutonium, named after Pluto, the deity of the underworld, is a stone doorway leading to a small 32-square-foot cave. But the real danger is what is going on beneath it. Hierapolis is a super active geological area, and there's a big crack under the city that constantly emits volcanic carbon dioxide, which comes up as a visible mist. During the day, the sun dissipates the gas. At night, the gas forms some kind of a carbon dioxide lake on the sheltered arena floor. At dawn, you need to get out of there before it's too late. This whole place can turn particularly life-threatening right before the sun rises, when the carbon dioxide concentration, about 15 inches above the arena floor, reaches 35%. That means birds, bulls, and even humans can suffocate and pass away in just a couple of minutes. But there is a scientific reason that explains how Romans could get out of there unharmed. The carbon dioxide concentration drops quickly with height, so animals perished while their handlers, being taller and standing up, could walk out and breathe safely. Most people can't stay inside the Begarn fort after sunset. This 16th century fort, located about 146 miles from Delhi, is known as one of the most haunted places in India. During the day, the area is bustling with visitors who can walk through the main gate of this once grand fort city and check out the ruins of temples and palaces. But they will also see this big sign at the gate that dramatically warns everybody that all access is strictly forbidden after dark. That's probably because at night, according to locals, women can be heard screaming and crying in that place, along with the sounds of bangles breaking and strange music. Others have reported seeing shadowy figures and flashing lights among the ruins, or even smelling a strange perfume floating around. Yawata no Yabushirasu is one of Japan's most restricted forests, located in Ichikawa. The forest itself is a small area, covering just a little more than 40 square yards, and it is mostly a thick patch of mosu bamboo. Its location next to a parking lot and modern buildings makes it seem less intimidating, but don't be mistaken by its appearance. Since at least the 19th century, people have said that anyone who enters this forest is bound to disappear and never be seen again. So, as soon as you arrive, a sign near the forest tells you about its history and the curse believed to be linked to it. Some rumors suggest the creepy presence of an ancient samurai lord walking around. Other legends say that the forest hides a bottomless pit filled with poisonous gas. Whether these stories are true or not, today the area is enclosed by stone walls, and entry is still strictly prohibited. In a valley called the Dark Entry Forest in Connecticut, you will find Dudleytown, but you definitely shouldn't go inside. Not only has the land been private property since the 1920s, but it is also known as one of the spookiest places on Earth. This place was first settled in the early 1740s, and many of the original settlers were from the Dudley family. That's why it's called Dudleytown. There's a local rumor that the town's founders were descended from Edmund Dudley, an English nobleman who lost his life for treason. The legend says this curse followed the Dudley family all the way across the Atlantic to America, and their misfortune is said to be responsible for crop failures, mental problems, and several tragic incidents in the village. Again, it is all just rumors, since historians haven't found any real evidence to support these claims. Still, The pitch-black surroundings and the eerie Blair Witch Project vibe going on in that place fueled ghost stories in the 1980s. This led to many cases of vandalism in the following decade, and because of that, the landowners closed the area to the public. This old abandoned building used to be the fancy palace of King Farouk's family, who was the penultimate king of Egypt back in 1936. After his family members passed away, the palace was turned into a morgue. Locals say that today, the whole place is super creepy and off-limits. Some people have reported seeing light bulbs flicker and shadows move around, making strange noises. Once, a group of kids allegedly went inside and totally freaked out when they found all the doors had suddenly disappeared, leaving them in complete darkness. They had no choice but to start screaming for help. This Hawaiian island has been off-limits to people for over a century. It's called Ni'ihau and is the smallest inhabited island in Hawaii, covering around 69.5 square miles. It has around 84 residents. The island doesn't have cell phone service, paved roads, or power lines, just solar panels for electricity. A single family has privately owned the island since 1864, when a Scottish farmer bought it for $10,000, which would be around $250,000 today. The island has stayed in the family, passing down to its descendants, the Robinsons. They have kept it private ever since, so access is highly restricted and basically by invitation only. The Erdstall tunnels are a network of about 2,000 mysterious underground passageways mainly found in Central Europe, especially in Austria and Bavaria. These tunnels are usually narrow and cramped, often just wide enough for one person to squeeze through at a time, and they are believed to date back to the Middle Ages, as far back as the 12th century. What's really puzzling about these tunnels is their purpose. Despite a lot of research, nobody really knows why they were built. There is a theory that they were used for storage, but since many of them are below the waterline and occasionally get filled with water, that doesn't seem very practical. These tunnels have very light, almost claustrophobic sections and sudden drops, which doesn't seem practical for other straightforward uses like escape routes, hiding places, or even spiritual purposes. To make things even more mysterious, there is a complete lack of artifacts, which makes it even harder for researchers to figure out what these tunnels were really for. Since 2019, adventurous people can get arrested if they try to climb this rock. Uluru, also known as Ayers Rock, has been off-limits because it is now considered a sacred site for local communities. But the fact that it is also extremely dangerous probably played a big role in the decision to close it off to visitors. This rock is 1,142 feet high, which is about the height of an 80-story building. The climb to the summit can be very slippery, and high temperatures, which can hit 116 degrees Fahrenheit in the summer, have led to people passing away from dehydration and heat-related issues. Something even creepier happens at the top of the rock right after storms. When it rains, small tadpole-like crustaceans called shield shrimp hatch in temporary waterholes and rock pools on top of Uluru. These extraterrestrial-looking creatures are about 3 inches long, and they spread their super resilient eggs everywhere. When enough summer rain comes, they hatch and go wild, feeding on microorganisms and bacteria in the water. How these strange creatures end up in the fleeting pools on top of Uluru is still unclear, but the most likely explanation is that their eggs might travel there with the wind.
There's a stretch of water that even the most experienced explorers fear. No matter what season you choose to cross it in, you risk meeting face-to-face with waves that can reach as tall as the Hollywood sign. I'm talking about the Drake Passage, the waterway connecting the Pacific Ocean to the Atlantic Ocean, stretching from Cape Horn at South America's southernmost tip to Antarctica's South Shetland Islands. It's about as wide as the distance from London to Berlin and takes up to 48 hours to cross. Some sailors compare getting on the other side to going to the moon. That's how challenging it is. Even the man who discovered it, Sir Francis Drake, never sailed these waters because they seemed too dangerous to him and opted for a calmer, although longer, Strait of Magellan. The passage took the lives of around 20,000 sailors and over 800 ships. Tourists who want to see Antarctica cross the Drake Passage on a regular basis, although it's still often called the world's most terrifying ocean crossing. The Antarctic Peninsula, where travelers go, isn't really part of Antarctica itself. It sticks out and points towards South America like two fingers almost touching it. The water gets squeezed between these two land masses, making strong ocean currents. The passage is part of the Antarctic Circumpolar Current, the largest ocean current on Earth. The water rushes through the passage at a speed between 95 and 150 million cubic meters per second, which makes it rougher. And then there are winds that usually blow from west to east and are very strong between 40 and 60 degrees latitude. That's why those areas are called the Roaring Forties, Furious 50s, and Screaming 60s. Land slows down winds, which is why storms hitting Ireland and the UK get weaker as they move east. But Drake's latitude is the only place where winds can blow all around the Earth without being stopped by land, so they keep getting faster. These strong winds turn into huge waves that can hit ships really hard, normally around 13 to 16 feet tall. They're much higher than waves in the Atlantic. Drake Passage also has underwater mountains that you can't see. The huge current squeezes through this narrow passage and causes waves to crash against these mountains underwater. These internal waves create whirls that bring cold water up from the deep ocean. So it's not just rough on the surface, the water is wild all the way down. The first sailor managed to sail around Cape Horn and through the Drake Passage in 1616. It was a Dutch navigator, Willem Schouten, in 1616. But the most famous attempt to cross it was undertaken by Sir Ernest Henry Shackleton on his ship named Endurance. He and 27 of his men set off from South Georgia, aiming to reach Vassal Bay in Antarctica. But things didn't go as planned. On January 19, 1915, their ship got stuck in the ice. And by October, it began to sink. They camped on floating ice for 2 months before sailing lifeboats to a remote, icy place called Elephant Island. Shackleton and 5 men made a risky journey to South Georgia to get help. It took them 15 days to cross Drake Passage with hurricane winds. Finally, they arrived safely and organized a rescue for the rest of their crew. Scientists found the shipwreck of Endurance only in 2022, 10,000 feet below the water. In December of 2019, 6 fearless athletes decided to cross the Drake Passage by rowing a boat for the first time in history. It took them 12 days of non-stop rowing with a 90-minute rotation of rowers. They managed to do it, and it was probably the hardest possible way to cross the passage. The athletes mentioned it was cold, wet, and dirty, and the waves hit them like walls. The weather in the Drake Passage changes a lot, but ship captains can always see it coming and change their path. They will move the departure time to have a safety margin and not to get stuck in the middle of the passage in the worst possible conditions. Sometimes, the journey will be smooth and calm, and they call it Drake Lake. Other times, people on the ship will feel rough waves, which is called Drake Shake. Some experienced captains who often cross the passage say that the Drake Lake effect happens once in every 10 crossings. And they see the Drake Shake once or twice in every 10 journeys. A schooner or a kayak will probably not survive the journey among giant waves, but modest vessels and cruise ships have sturdy hulls and advanced stabilizing mechanisms. So, the journey isn't that dangerous anymore, but still, it's quite an adventure, especially if you're seasick. If you don't feel like risking it but want to travel from the Pacific Ocean to the Atlantic Ocean by water the fast way, the Panama Canal is waiting for you. People first started thinking about making a water path across Panama in the 16th century. Back then, a Spanish explorer found out that only a thin piece of land separated the two oceans. But it seemed impossible to build it because of the mountains and thick jungle, so the idea had to wait a couple of centuries. Finally, in 1880, France, led by the man who built the Suez Canal in Egypt, tried to make the canal. But the people who started the construction soon found out it was much harder than it looked on a map. The land in Panama was one of the toughest and most dangerous places to dig a big waterway, Workers had to literally move huge mountains in a jungle full of snakes, where it was really hot and rainy. During the wet season, heavy rain turned rivers into wild rapids and soaked the workers. Sometimes, they didn't see the sun for 2 weeks, and their clothes stayed wet all the time. Big rocks were falling, and tiny mosquitoes that carried malaria made people very sick. And then, an earthquake happened on top of everything. They were losing thousands of people. That's why France decided to abandon the project after 7 years. Then, the United States bought the French assets in the canal zone and finished it by 1914. It cost the US around $375 million. The 50-mile-long passage of water saves ships traveling between New York and San Francisco 7,872 miles. Around 14,000 ships use it every year and pay around $1.8 million in tolls. So it looks like it all paid off. Another challenging waterway in this part of the world is the Amazon River. It's around 4,300 miles long and flows through 3 countries with over 30 million people living in its basin. But there isn't a single bridge across it. The river has many marshes and soft soils, so engineers would need to build very long bridges and very deep foundations, which costs a lot of money. Building bridges over deep water is tough, but in other places in the world, engineers can use things like floating platforms to help. The river's path and water levels change a lot during the year. During the dry season from June to November, the river is usually 2 to 6 miles wide. But in the wet season from December to April, the river can become as wide as 30 miles. And the water level can rise by 50 feet. That's why they can't build floating bridges or pontoons. The riverbanks are made of soft dirt that moves and erodes with the seasons, and it makes things even harder. It would have to be an absolutely unique project to overcome all these challenges. Luckily, there's no pressing need for a bridge across the Amazon right now. The river mostly goes through areas that are sparsely populated, so there aren't so many major roads to be connected by bridges.
So, you want to get as close to the moon as possible without leaving Earth? Easy. Hop on a plane to Ecuador and climb Mount Chimborazo. I know, it may sound weird, but hear me out. Now, Everest is the tallest mountain when you're measuring from sea level, but Chimborazo's peak is actually the closest spot on Earth to the moon. Here's the physics behind it. Mount Everest is over 29,000 feet tall, and Chimborazo is only around 20,000 feet. But the secret lies in how far they are from the Earth's core. You see, Earth is not a perfect sphere. It's chubby in the middle and slightly squished at the top and the bottom. The chubby part in the middle is called the equator. FYI, the country Ecuador actually translates to equator in Spanish. Now you know. The mountain we're talking about, Chimborazo, is located a few degrees from the equator line. So since the squishy sphere is chubbier in the middle part, Chimborazo's peak sticks out farther into space. This means that if you hike all the way up to this mountain's peak, you'll be a smidge closer to the moon than if you hike all the way up Mount Everest. In the North Sea, off the coast of England, there's a tiny platform bobbing around, roughly the size of 2 tennis courts. You might think it's an oil platform, but this is Sealand, the world's tiniest country. The Ruff's Tower platform was built during the first half of the 20th century as a fort to protect English ships. Jump to the 1960s when a guy named Paddy Roy Bates decided to claim this old fort as his own country, naming it the Principality of Sealand. Paddy gave his country everything it deserved: a national flag, currency, a constitution, stamps, and a hoisting swing system. That's how you get into the country, by the way, hoisted all the way up to the upper part of the platform. Today, this micronation is headed by ruling monarch Michael Bates, who is a member of the country's self-proclaimed royalty. I know, right? Why wait in line for the British throne? The nation has its own fan club, who cheer for the country's national soccer club. Their team competes in international tournaments where they usually play with other tiny nations. Although Sealand only has one official resident as of right now, players from other countries join to help out their soccer team. One of the country's supporters also placed a Sealand flag on top of Mount Everest. Having your kitchen in one country and your living room in another, well, this is the daily reality for some locals in Barle. In this town, the border between Belgium and the Netherlands doesn't just run along streets, it slices right through buildings. So to navigate this setup, a rule was made that a house's nationality is determined where its front door is located. But this solution created its own problems. There's a house where the front door is exactly on the border, giving it two addresses, one in Belgium and one in the Netherlands. The owners of this house were given a unique opportunity. They could choose which country they'd like to get their utilities from, like gas and water. And you guessed it, they picked the country where the stuff was cheaper, in this case, Belgium. Down in Senegal, Africa, there's a lake that looks like something straight out of a sci-fi movie. About 18 miles north of the capital, Dakar, you'll find Lake Retba, also known as Lac Rosa. This lake is famous for its bright pink water. Yes, it really is pink, and you can even take a swim if you're up for it. But be prepared, the water is super salty, one of the saltiest lakes in the world with salt levels over 40%. The pink color comes from a species of tiny algae. These algae produce red pigments that reflect sunlight, giving the lake its unique shade. If you want to see the lake at its brightest pink, visit during the dry season from November to June. The rainwater during other times of the year can wash away some of the color. Oh, by the way, there are other pink lakes around the world, like Lake Hillier in Western Australia and Lake Natron in Tanzania. So there's a hill that seems to be on fire all the time. Located in the Arctic region of Canada, the Smoking Hills are a truly unique sight on Earth. Some of the minerals found here are so rare that they've only been spotted on Mars. For at least a couple of hundred years, the ground here has been smoking continuously. At first, explorers thought this was due to an active volcano, but it turns out the smoke comes from something else. The soil in the Smoking Hills contains sulfur and coal, and when these materials mix with oxygen, they can spontaneously catch fire and keep on burning. But don't get any adventurous ideas about visiting. The environment here is extremely harsh, there's toxic smoke, and the temperatures can be dangerously high. So, I'd try Orlando. New Zealand is famous for its stunning landscapes, but it also has a hidden treasure underground. Deep in some caves in the country's North Island, you can find a mesmerizing natural wonder. To see it, you'll need to go down about 150 feet in a series of dark, twisting caves. As you go deeper, you'll enter complete darkness until you reach the cave ceilings, which are lined with tiny glowing creatures. These are New Zealand's native glowworms, which are the larvae of a special type of fungus gnat found only in this country. They shine a bright blue light to attract prey. If you get a chance to tour these caves, it feels like floating through a galaxy, with thousands of these living stars sparkling above and their glow reflecting in the water beneath your boat. It's an incredible sight, like stepping into a magical glowing world. Mexico is home to one of the most amazing caves in the world, called the Cave of Crystals. If you think you've seen big crystals before, wait until you see these. In around 1910, miners in the town of Nica, Chihuahua, like the dog, discovered a cave full of clear selenite crystals. But it wasn't until 90 years later that they found an even more incredible cave filled with enormous crystals, some as long as 39 feet and weighing up to 55 tons. Scientists believe that 26 million years ago, give or take, hot, mineral-rich water filled this cave, allowing these huge crystals to grow. The Nica crystals are thought to be the biggest in the world, making people standing next to them look teeny in comparison. However, exploring the cave isn't easy. Inside, temperatures reach 136 degrees Fahrenheit. Even with protection, people can only stay inside for 20 to 30 minutes. It's an extraordinary place, but not exactly a comfortable one for humans. Mauritius is famous for its beautiful beaches and clear blue waters. But it also has a stunning optical illusion at its southwest corner that looks like an underwater waterfall. Even though it seems like water is flowing down into the ocean, what you're actually seeing is a trick of the light and the seafloor. The island is on an ocean shelf that's only about 500 feet deep, but just beyond the edge, it drops down to 2.5 miles deep. This drop creates the illusion of a waterfall as currents push sand and particles over the edge, making it look like water is cascading down. So, while it's not a real underwater waterfall, it's definitely a cool sight to see from a boat. Now here's a place that might either give you chills or leave you in awe, depending on when you visit. Near the small town of Grafino in Poland, there's a forest of pine trees with a strange twist. They're all bent at their bases. During the day, these trees with their sharp 90-degree curves look fascinating and even a bit whimsical. You might even find a comfortable spot to sit on if you're having a picnic. But visit the crooked forest at night, and it takes on a whole different vibe. A thin layer of fog hangs around, making the forest look eerie and a bit spooky. Plus, scientists still don't know why for sure the trees are bent like this. So, would you prefer to see it in the bright light of day or the mysterious dark of night? Ooh. So, your phone needs an entire night to charge. Bummer, right? A cool Indian origin researcher has you covered. He's discovered a super speedy way to charge your laptops and phones in just 1 minute. Imagine a battery getting fully juiced while you're brushing your teeth. Not only that, but you can also juice up your electric car in just 10 minutes. Ankar Gupta, the brain behind this discovery, along with his team of researchers at the University of Colorado Boulder, found a way to make charged particles move really fast through tiny pores. This breakthrough can lead to the creation of super-efficient energy storage devices called supercapacitors. Not only do they charge up super quickly, but they also last longer than regular batteries. According to specialists, the magic lies in the efficient movement of ions. Samsung is gearing up to introduce a game-changer. Meet Bali, a cool spherical home robot designed to win over even the toughest skeptics who could use a helping hand around the house. In the past, Samsung teased us with a peek at what was to come, dropping hints about Bali way back in 2020. But the wait is finally over, as they can take the plunge into creating a robot that's an all-around home assistant. Samsung promises that you can get your very own Bali buddy in 2024. There are no firm details on pricing yet, but they're cutting us some slack by making all of Bali's features subscription-free. However, Samsung isn't alone in the quest for a spot in your living room. LG is hot on their heels, boasting about their own companion robot set to make its grand entrance in 2025. The Squad Solar City car might be the coolest ride in town. This innovative vehicle is the world's first solar-powered car designed for urban and suburban mobility. It's the perfect solution for tackling emissions and congestion in the city, whether you're sharing it with friends or cruising around solo. Imagine the ease of a moped combined with all the comforts and security of a car. That's what Squad offers. Also, say goodbye to parking headaches, traffic jams, and congestion charges. This ride is a significant change. Squad charges itself using solar energy, making it environmentally friendly and cost-effective. With its sleek design and compact size, parking is a breeze. You can fit 3 Squads in the space of 1 regular car. Plus, with swappable batteries and loads of storage space, this car is as practical as it is fun. I bet there's one thing your body does that you definitely take for granted, and it's going number 1. I'm talking about that mechanism we've got that helps us know exactly when it's time to go number 1. However, for some folks with spinal cord injuries or conditions like multiple sclerosis, that connection between the brain and the bladder can get a bit wonky, causing all sorts of issues. ManyThings, a cool company from South Korea, has produced a solution that's sure to save the day. They've created a nifty wearable patch that uses near-infrared technology to peer into your bladder and give you a heads up when it's time to hit the restroom. The person wearing it will just get a friendly reminder via a phone alert. Simply slap on the patch, stick it on your lower abdomen, and let the magic happen. The technology isn't out yet, but they're doing their best to make it hit the market as soon as possible. Now get ready to revolutionize your work-from-home routine with Lifespan's Ampera, the ultimate multitasking marvel for all you Silicon Valley trendsetters out there. Say goodbye to boring desktops and hello to a pedal-powered paradise that not only keeps you active, but also charges up your devices like a boss. Just 30 minutes of pedaling and bam! Your phone is halfway juiced up. And if you feel like really going for it, you can even charge up your laptop by cycling like a pro. This device may look like a funky bar stool with pedals, but it's a game changer for your home office setup. According to Lifespan CEO Jackie Wu, the Ampera is the go-to for people working from home who are tired of being glued to their desk all day. So, how do you feel when you catch a glimpse of yourself in the mirror first thing in the morning? Personally, I usually feel a little grumpy and definitely in need of some caffeine. But now, thanks to the Be Mind smart mirror from Paris-based tech company Barracuda, clever name, huh? That morning mirror check can actually be helpful. This magic mirror can analyze your expressions and gestures to figure out how you're feeling, and then offer up some personalized mental health coaching to get you on the right track for the day. With the help of AI and natural language processing, the mirror can provide guided meditations, light therapy, and affirmations to boost your mood. According to Barracuda specialists, this new technology has the potential to improve the quality of millions of lives by monitoring subtle changes in health. And that's not all the mirror can do. It can even help guide you through your morning toothbrushing routine and analyze your skin's needs. But the real question is, can it whip up a cup of coffee? Unfortunately, not yet. But maybe that'll be the next upgrade. Meet Custo, the ultimate smart home parcel box that brings convenience right to your doorstep. Imagine having your very own personal custodian, keeping track of all your incoming and outgoing parcels and alerting you when needed. No need to worry about manual input. Custo opens with just a scan of the parcel's tracking number, thanks to real-time checks with over 1,500 courier APIs. You can easily grant access to family and friends through the mobile app, using unique QR codes for one-time or recurring visits. Plus, rest assured that your smartphone will promptly notify you about every delivery. Taking a leisurely stroll is a fantastic way to get your exercise in. But let's face it, sometimes it's not as easy as it sounds. Whether you're getting up there in age, battling some condition, or just feeling a little weak in the muscles, walking can be a real challenge. Enter WIM, the brainchild of South Korean robotics wizards at Wii Robotics. This nifty little gadget straps around your waist and legs, giving you a 20% boost in energy while you walk. This means you can go further and feel less like collapsing at the end of your jaunt. The AI technology inside analyzes how you walk and even predicts your next move, getting smarter with each step you take. Plus, WIM isn't just for those hardcore athletes or folks with medical needs. It's for anyone who just wants to jazz up their daily stroll. The whole shebang weighs just 3 pounds and folds up into a compact little package that you can toss in your bag. And if you're feeling extra adventurous, WIM has an exercise mode that mimics walking through water, giving your muscles a real workout. Well, it's been a long time since we last saw those old physical keyboards on cell phones because touchscreens took over the industry. But wait! Click's technology has come up with a brilliant solution for those nostalgic BlackBerry fans. This cool iPhone case brings back that classic keyboard feel, thanks to a team of former BlackBerry, Apple, and Google employees. Sure, it may be a little pricey, costing almost $140 and slightly bulky. But who cares when you can type away like it's 2007? Finally, not all the chapsticks are the same. Lip Cure Beam may look like one, but it's the ultimate beauty gadget. This cool contraption does it all, from diagnosing your lips to giving them the TLC they need, and even adding a pop of color with makeup. The sleek Lip Cure Beam cap has a special sensor that analyzes your lips' moisture level in a snap. Once you pop off the cap, you've got a handy makeup tool at your fingertips. With a swish and a swash, you'll be on your way to luscious lips in no time. Made with some fancy light-responsive materials, this nifty gadget works its magic by boosting your lips' natural defenses. There's a mysterious island that appears and disappears like magic. Just like Schrödinger's cat, this Schrödinger's island exists and doesn't exist at the same time. Officially, it's called Sandy Island, and it once appeared in maps, but it was never there in real life. Australian scientists decided to solve the mystery once and for all by embarking on an adventure to find this elusive archipelago. But when they reached the coordinates, all they found was endless blue waves. It's like the island was playing a game of hide-and-seek with them. This story goes back to 1876. A whaling ship was crossing the area and reported an island. Whoever saw it said it was over 15 miles long north to south and around 3 miles wide, about the size of Manhattan, so not so tiny at all. But every time researchers went to visit the area, they found nothing. So in 1974, an official mission from New Caledonia declared that Sandy Island was simply not a thing and excluded it from all maps. People went on with their lives until they noticed that the island was appearing on Google Earth as a black blob. In 2012, another Australian expedition went out to check out the area to get some explanations. They had to write a eulogy for the long-lost island and explain what could have created this mess. For starters, mapping technology wasn't at its peak back in the 1900s. It was easy to get the coordinates wrong. Then there was the fact that the area is big on volcanic activities. It's likely that volcanic lava cooled down and created a raft of some kind. Let's say that the whaling ship went by, saw the volcanic raft, and thought it was land from a distance. But hey, it's just a guess. Humans have ventured far and wide across the globe, and it may have seemed at some point that we discovered each and every nook of our planet. But when Mount Lico popped up on Google Earth, scientists were overcome with excitement. This hidden gem in northern Mozambique is no ordinary rainforest. It's nestled inside a volcano. Determined to confirm the existence of this mysterious forest, experts assembled a team of top-notch scientists and specialists from around the world. The journey to Mount Lico was no walk in the park, with a daunting vertical rock climb standing between them and the forest. But after 6 years of planning and preparation, they were ready for the challenge. Once they got there, they saw it was even better than they imagined. The place was like a perfectly tended garden. The forest sounded unique and different from other rainforests. There were some insanely huge caterpillars that looked dangerous. And they even found ancient pots and evidence of an untouched human ecosystem. Ooh. Terra incognita means unknown land. And one of the largest unknown territories being uncovered today is the land beneath Antarctica's ice sheets. Below the snowy surface, there is an entirely new world of canyons, waterways, and lakes, which are now being mapped. One can't help but wonder, is there really liquid water below Antarctica's frozen surface? Yep. Water can exist without freezing due to pressure. The liquid water is the result of Earth's warm interior, and that's how we get things such as Lake Vostok. Now, you can't see it, but Lake Vostok is right here. Located in East Antarctica, it lies beneath 2.5 miles of thick ice. This huge lake is about 4,800 square miles. Humans could only discover it with the help of some top-notch technologies like seismic soundings and ice-penetrating radars. According to these scientists, it's likely that the lake has been there for up to 15 million years. Bhutan is on the map for, among other things, being the happiest country in all of Asia. But it kept a hidden gem for all these years, one of the world's tallest unclimbed mountains, Kunkar Pansum. Bhutan is enmeshed in the glorious Himalayan mountains. That's why the climbing community was beyond excited when they discovered an untouched mountain. Imagine being the first person to climb an unexplored peak. That would probably guarantee you a spot in the Guinness World Records for sure. The mountain has been untouched because of a Bhutanese law. For locals, the mountain peak is a sacred site, shrouded in mystery and legends. One of their beliefs is that the sacredness of climbing a mountain lies not in reaching its peak, but in truly communing with the mountain and enjoying the process. We got to admit, that is a bit of a newsflash for Westerners. If you're ever in the state of New York, make sure you check out the Aglo General Store. You'll have to drive somewhere around the Catskills to find a beautiful, grand, big nothing. Aglo is one of America's most famous paper towns, aka a fake town. But this case is different from Sandy Island. Aglo Town never existed, and it wasn't a mistake. You see, there's an old copyright practice amongst map makers. They add in paper towns so they can know when someone is simply copy-pasting their work. What they didn't expect is that this would get completely out of hand. Some say that one day a guy picked up a map at a gas station that had Agloe Town marked in it. The person decided to open a store over there and named it Agloe General Store. Some say the guy who opened the store faced a lawsuit from the map makers. Anyways, it only lasted enough years to become a national joke. Americans drove from all over the U.S. to get a picture of the town's fake welcome sign. And then we've got Bermeja Island, located in the Gulf of Mexico. This funky island appeared on many maps of the 16th and 17th centuries. It was probably drawn by Spanish explorers. Sure, the exact location varied from map to map, and its name sometimes appeared as Bermeja, but its existence was certain enough. The Bermeja Island was last seen in a 1921 Mexican map, and then, poof, it dropped out of the horizon altogether. People started talking and wondering, did the island sink? Was it destroyed? In 2009, 3 official investigations happened to search for the island. They used high-tech technologies to scour the Mexican seabed, but Bermeja was nowhere. Researchers had multiple guesses on what it could be. Let's delve on one of these ideas. The idea was probably made up by old-day explorers to mislead their enemies in search of land and gold. Well, that seems plausible. Now, let's take a look at Rio de Janeiro. Once, the city was filled with informal territories. These places are known as slums or favelas. They're like mini-cities inside the big city. Some favelas are known to be underprivileged territories, where dwellers don't get the same urban perks as other citizens, such as the sewage system and garbage pickups. These slums grew so quickly that the government didn't have time to keep track of their developments. So today, it's usually the dwellers themselves that name the streets and make do with whatever they have at their disposal. One of the biggest slums in Brazil is located in Rio de Janeiro, the so-called Hacienda, and it was only recognized as a neighborhood by the local government in the 1990s. Our own ocean floor is less mapped than Venus, Mars, and the Moon. In fact, 95% of our oceans are unexplored. Strange, right? We do have the available technology, which is mainly sonar soundings, sending wave sounds to the ocean bed and registering what they hear back. One of the main advantages of mapping the seabed more thoroughly would be to get more insight to marine hazards such as earthquakes, tsunamis, and volcanic eruptions. Plus, there are so many unidentified marine life. This could give us a great insight into preservation and discovering the true dynamics of our marine ecosystems. Now, the next time you travel the world on Google Maps, check out this lake in Finland that is shaped just like the country itself. This lake was modified by humans in the north of the country and is an exact model of the country on a 1 to 10,000 scale. In the 1980s, Arctic tourism and skiing above the Arctic Circle was booming. A local company decided to build a hotel and plenty of holiday cabins here. The pond, shaped like Finland, was supposed to bring more tourists to the area. They managed to finish it in just 1 week with 2 excavators, a tape measure, and a few sticks. And I must say, they did a great job. If you don't like long elevators, head to Hanover, Germany. One of the outdoor elevators there only travels for a few inches, and the whole experience takes a few seconds. It has become a real star on social media after some tourists posted footage of it, so you might have to wait in line to enjoy your short ride. In case you're wondering what's the point of this elevator, well, it's installed at the local train station. Every inch counts when you're traveling with heavy luggage or have limited mobility, so it's a good way to navigate within the station. Gummy bear fans, you might want to know that your favorite chewy treat has enough energy in it to start a fire show. If you drop 1 gummy bear into an ignition tube with a small amount of molten potassium or sodium chlorate in it, it will quickly disappear in a ball of fire with an impressive fume cloud. First, potassium chlorate melts. Then the melted potassium chlorate breaks down and releases oxygen. The sugar in the gummy bear burns quickly, turning into carbon dioxide and water, which gives off a lot of energy. After everything cools down, you can look at what's left. The black stuff is unburned carbon, the white solid is potassium chloride, and the caramel-looking stuff is partially burned sugar. So we only have 6 muscles in our outer ear, and cats have an impressive 32. That's why they can rotate their ears 180 degrees and use them to show their current mood. If you see the ears are upright and facing forward, you have one happy cat. If the ears are rotated to the sides, sort of like airplane wings, or angled backward, your kitty must be really stressed or afraid of something. Ears held low or rotated to the sides could be a sign the cat is sick, so watch out for those. A stray dog in Brazil got a job as a professional car consultant at a local Hyundai dealership. The company manager noticed a stray pup next to the dealership and started leaving food and water for his new friend. Other staff members also fell in love with the pup and finally decided to adopt him. The doggy got a home, a job, and the name Tucson, after Hyundai's popular compact SUV. Tucson's job includes wearing a tie, getting behind the wheel, and winning over the hearts of customers. You can see from the company's social media that he excels at all these tasks. In Mexico, they like to spice up mango and citrus fruits with salt and chili pepper. You can try mango with a shrimp taste in the Philippines and salted watermelon in the southern states. When you're eating a sweet fruit sprinkled with salt, you'll notice the salty flavor with the first bite, and the sweet fruity taste follows a bit later. And when you get used to it, it feels as juicy and amazing as ever. It's most likely because salt affects the sweet taste receptor for sugar, and then the real magic happens on a molecular level. You can try and put salt on any fruit you like, but the effect will be different. Salt can make sweeter fruits like cherries and strawberries even sweeter and balance the flavor of grapefruit, pineapple, and watermelon. Now, back in 1956, long before the first dating apps were a thing, or apps in general, a Swedish sailor named Ake Viking decided to ask the sea for help to find a soulmate. He put a short message to someone beautiful and far away in a bottle and let it travel the world. 2 years later, he received a reply from a girl named Paulina from Sicily. She wrote that she wasn't really beautiful, but she thought it was super cool that the bottle had covered such a huge distance. That's why she decided to let the sender know she had found it. Well, they became pen pals, and after a while, you guessed it, Viking moved to Sicily to marry his one and only Paulina. That unique pattern on your fingertips stays with you for your entire life. If you happen to damage your fingerprints somehow, or develop some skin condition that can change them, they'll still grow back within a month. As you grow older, the skin on your fingertips becomes less elastic and the ridges get thicker, but the pattern still doesn't change. It just becomes harder to scan. If you work as a bricklayer, though, or have to handle certain chemicals, you might lose some details in your beautiful natural pattern. But no worries, once you stop doing those activities, you'll get your fingertips back. Unless maybe you're a meat cutter. If you still believe in the 5-second rule, there's some bad news for you. When your food hits the floor, it instantly becomes a bacteria magnet. Researchers discovered that moisture, surface type, and contact time all play a role in how badly contaminated your food will get. Food with high moisture levels, like juicy watermelon, are more likely to get in trouble fast. In a different study, researchers swabbed the floors around the University of Illinois in a lab, hall, dormitory, and cafeteria to see how many organisms they could find. Even on dry, sterile surfaces, germs relocated onto cookies and gummy bears in less than 5 seconds. For some foods, it took less than 1 second for the transfer to begin. The first Barbie doll was made in 1959, but her great-great-great-grandmother comes from ancient Rome. Archaeologists found some incredible sarcophagi during construction work in Rome in the 19th century. One of those had a 9-inch-long doll next to its owner. The head and body were made from a single piece of ivory. Its arms and legs were separate and connected with a clever nail mechanism, allowing them to move. Its face was so detailed that it looked like a tiny portrait. The doll even wore a tiny gold ring with a key on its finger and had a small ivory box full of jewels, tiny mirrors, bone combs, and the remnants of accessories. But Ken was nowhere to be found. In case you're looking for a new job and you love to cuddle, there might be an opening for you. As weird as it sounds, a professional snuggler is a real job. There are several companies that provide cuddling services and look for staff members who are ready to give hugs and snuggles and listen and support people who really need it. Now, anyone can give hugs to others, but you need to be trained in professional cuddling to make money out of it. You will need to learn to set boundaries with your future clients without hurting their feelings and to mentally care for others without giving away too much of your own personality. Famous scientist Nikola Tesla knew that the whole world would go wireless back in 1900. He mentioned that devices no larger than a watch would be able to transfer signals precisely. Back then, it was a revolutionary idea the scientist got while conducting experiments at one of his labs. Tesla was so confident about the success of his idea that he even convinced famous banker J.P. Morgan to invest money in his project. The World Wireless System involved a tower shaped like a mushroom on the shores of Long Island. It was supposed to transmit messages, phone calls, and images to ships across the Atlantic Ocean. Sadly, because of financial issues, the tower was never finished. Oh well, it all turned out now, didn't it?
Venice banned new kebab shops and other fast food outlets in an attempt to maintain the city's decorum and traditions. It happened several years ago when the authorities passed a law to limit the opening of these types of restaurants, with only artisanal ice cream shops being exempt from the ban. The city's tourism chief explained that the goal is to preserve Venice's cultural heritage and promote local products. The concern is that fast food establishments could detract from the city's unique identity and harm the environment. Venice is not the only Italian city taking action against fast food. Verona and Florence have also implemented restrictions on new kebab shops and foreign food establishments. In 2012, London restaurants were in an uproar after the ban on rare and medium-rare burgers had been announced by the Westminster City Council. They claimed it was for health reasons, but some were skeptical. One chef even said that if they stuck to these rules, they might as well kiss the burger industry goodbye. Others worry it's just the beginning, and soon we won't be able to enjoy runny eggs or steak tartare either. Raw and undercooked meat can indeed be dangerous, but many believe the authorities are overreacting. However, with previous incidents like the mad cow disease outbreak in mind, it's clear the council is just trying to be cautious. By the way, in New Zealand, you can't order your burger rare either, all because of some pesky bacteria concerns. Pufferfish is a Japanese delicacy that only the bravest dare to try. Their highly poisonous internal organs, for instance, the liver, contains tetrodotoxin, which is extremely toxic. This poison can enter your body in multiple ways: through a cut on your skin, when you inhale it, and, of course, if you eat it. Normally, people can't stay alive if they eat this fish. Yet, Japanese chefs are trained to remove the poisonous parts from a delicacy with a hefty price tag named fugu. It's almost completely banned in the US. There are only a few authorized places that sell it, and in order to do so, they need to have a special license. Just so you know, it's not only pufferfish that has this poison. Most octopi and cuttlefish have it too. Casu marzu, known as rotten cheese in Italian, is unsurprisingly banned in the US. But hey, if you're feeling adventurous and want to give it a try, head to Sardinia, Italy. This cheese is made from sheep's milk and has a little twist. Special flies lay eggs in it. Ugh! Maggots have around 40 days to invade the cheese, and then it's left for 2 to 3 months with maggots in it. The live maggots in the cheese help decompose it, giving it a unique texture and spicy flavor. It may be banned in the US, but it's definitely worth a try if you're ever in Italy. You may think there's everything a person may want in the US, but then, bam! One day you wake up craving some haggis, and it turns out this tender dish is legally banned in the land of liberty. The reason behind it isn't because Americans prefer mac and cheese or burgers, but because some ingredients haggis has aren't considered to be safe in the US, namely sheep lungs. and they make 15% of this dish. In fact, there's a full range of sheep's inner parts, plus some oatmeal, a lot of minced onions, suet, and some broth. It's quite crumbly and coarse, and it's also spicy. If the description didn't make you change your mind, get ready for a transcontinental flight and see you in Edinburgh. Sadly, haggis isn't the only Scottish dish banned somewhere in the world. Black pudding and other similar dishes from around the world are banned in the US due to sanitary reasons. However, if someone tells you that people in Canada went even further and banned iron brew and Marmite, don't believe them. Canadian authorities stated otherwise several years ago. Sorry folks, but there simply ain't enough room in Sweden for both M&M's and Marabou chocolates to coexist peacefully. It's like a Wild West showdown between these colorful candies marked with the letter M. So, who won the trademark battle? Marabou chocolates, of course. They've been holding the fort since the 1950s, while M&M's only rode into town in 2009. In a twist of fate, a Swedish court laid down the law in 2016 and ruled that Mars couldn't sell M&M's with lowercase m letters on the packaging. So if you're craving some peanut M&M's in Sweden, you'll have to settle for the version with capital M's on the packaging. The World Health Organization recently gave out validation certificates to Denmark, Lithuania, Poland, Saudi Arabia, and Thailand for eliminating trans fats from their foods. Trans fats are bad for our health and pretty easy to get rid of, making it a simple yet important nutrition policy for countries to follow. WHO now has a cool new program where they give out certificates to countries that kick trans fats to the curb. Kind of like how they do for getting rid of diseases like polio and smallpox. Horse meat is banned in many states in the US, first and foremost, for ethical reasons. It's considered cruel to eat horse meat there. However, some people also think there are safety reasons to avoid this type of meat. The thing is, horse meat is not particularly good for health due to various toxins found in it. Americans sure do love their salmon. But do you know that the farm-raised salmon in the US gets its coral color from being fed a carotenoid called synthetic astaxanthin? Yikes! This chemical is actually banned from consumption in some countries, such as Australia and New Zealand. And how about milk we all drink? Unless it's specifically marked, it's treated with artificial hormones to boost milk production. The FDA says there's no difference in the milk, but countries like Canada and the European Union ban it. Who knew? Chicken in the US gets washed in chlorine to reduce the risk of spreading illnesses like salmonella. Sounds good, right? Well, the UK and Europe think differently and banned this practice due to some unsanitary farming concerns. And let's not forget about the pork industry using ractopamine to beef up their livestock. While this is common in the US, over 160 other countries have banned this drug in meat production. Quite the difference in opinion, huh? The next time you're munching on those yummy Swiss rolls, keep in mind that the food dyes yellow 5 and red 40 in them are considered problematic in Europe and have warnings for kids. You got it, they're banned in at least 2 European countries, Austria and Norway. The rest of the countries require a special label on the packaging. Many break-based products in the US, like croissant, French toast sticks, and pre-sliced breakfast use azodicarbonamide as a whitening agent. Europe says no to this chemical, but the FDA still allows it. It's like a foodie drama unfolding before our eyes. When enjoying rainbow-colored candy, consumers are not only experiencing the array of flavors, but they're also consuming food dyes such as yellow 5, yellow 6, and red 40. These dyes have been linked to negative effects, so, yet again, Europe requires special labels on the packaging because those dyes may have an adverse effect on activity and attention in kids. In countries like Norway and Austria, the dye called yellow 5 is completely banned from use. In 1996, the FDA approved Olestra as a fat substitute for use in snacks and chips in order to provide guilt-free snacking options. Despite this approval, Olestra has been associated with side effects such as abdominal cramping and loose stools, as well as inhibiting the absorption of important vitamins and nutrients. As a result, the additive has been banned in Canada and several European countries. Next time you grab snacks to eat in front of your favorite series, make sure to look out for Olestra. Trans fats such as partially hydrogenated soybean and cottonseed oils can even be found in your favorite coffee creamer. Yep, coffee's at risk too. Those have been associated with heart conditions. Even though those fats were officially prohibited in the United States in 2018, they continue to be present in the American food supply. In addition to the US, several other countries have also set a strict limit on trans fats, including Switzerland, Austria, Hungary, Iceland, Norway, and Denmark. These people can spend more than 5 hours a day underwater, and this must be the closest thing we have to actual mermaids. Meet the Bajau tribe from Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Philippines. This tribe developed an extraordinary mutation which helps them to almost live in the sea. Known as the nomads of the sea, they've been living near the waters of the Sulu Sea by the Philippines for nearly 1,000 years. Looks like Moana's got competition. Look at their houses. They're built on stilts, and there's a reason for it. These are the traditional lancha houseboats, which are great for getting to the water as often as possible. These little huts can fit a family of 5 and sometimes a community with up to 30 roommates. They're super easy to build. One hut can be completed in only 3 weeks. This also allows the Bajau to move freely across the seas. Since they lived in such a watery climate for generations, thriving on spearfishing and collecting shellfish, they started getting unusual mutations. You're probably thinking about superpowered lungs, but no. They actually developed bigger spleens than the rest of the world. It's 1.5 the size of a normal human. Why is it important? Because the spleen helps store oxygenated red blood cells, so having a bigger one is like having a natural scuba tank. This adaptation is similar to what happens in deep-diving seals, which also have large spleens. Scientists found that they have a special gene called PDE10A that's responsible for this. Bajau can hold their breath for about 10 minutes. For comparison, a regular human can do that for about 30 to 90 seconds. And the world record is 24 minutes and 37 seconds. They also spend up to 60% of their day underwater. And you'll never guess what diets they have. Of course, they eat a variety of sea creatures, especially lobsters, snails, and sea cucumbers, which are known for being very nutritional and even medicinal. They build their boats themselves, fish using traditional methods, and trade their surplus catch with the mainlanders for essential supplies. They also use this money to buy cassava and prepare their cultural dish called cassava pangikai. Since they don't have fridges, they line up tons of caught fish and sun-dry it. Thanks to this technique, the fish can last for weeks. People from this tribe are yet to develop gills and scales, but they have their underwater quirks. When they hold their breath and dive, their bodies go into a special mode where their heart rate slows down and their spleen squeezes out extra oxygen into their bloodstream. Usually, Bajau uses traditional wooden goggles and weighted belts. They also have incredible free-diving skills. They've conquered depths of over 230 feet. They start learning how to swim at about 8 years of age, or even younger. At the same time, they learn to hunt and survive in general. The Bajau people also make their own sunscreen. It's an everyday sunscreen called Borak Buas. It's mostly based on turmeric and rice powder, and women use it to protect their skin from the strong sun rays. It's a simple and cheap way to protect beauty, so it's especially popular among unmarried Bajau women who want to attract a potential spouse. But it's not all smooth sailing. In the 1950s, the Malaysian government put the Bajau in a pretty difficult legal position. After living for centuries as unrestricted nomads, now they have to carefully navigate its journeys across national borders and bureaucratic hurdles. This means that they're not fully stateless, but they're not officially recognized citizens of any country. Today, only a few hundred Bajau families live near Semporna, Malaysia, but it's getting harder to live such a life. The resources are scarce, and recently, some new restrictions appeared on cutting trees for boat repairs. All these things are slowly pushing them towards a more settled yet uncertain life on land. They're forced to resettle in places like the Bango settlement, but without citizenship, they essentially have no formal rights for things like getting jobs or education. Modern life poses tons of challenges for them. Imagine seeing millions more colors than everyone else. That's what tetrachromats can do. Tetrachromacy is a condition where someone has an extra type of cell in the back of their eye. This allows them to see a broader range of colors. If an average healthy person sees about 10 million, then tetrachromats might see 100 million. The extra cone enhances their ability to differentiate between subtle shades that others might not notice. This mutation requires 2 X chromosomes, so it actually happens to women. And it's not like this is a super rare thing either. The study says that about 12% of women possess this unique condition, and that's a huge number. Most tetrachromats don't even know they have this super vision. They might not realize they're seeing more colors than an average person. This makes spotting tetrachromats and studying them kinda tricky. And since scientists themselves usually can't see more than about 10 million colors, it's also pretty hard to test people for this condition. But they think that, like with X-Men, after some special training, tetrachromats might unlock the full potential of their ultra abilities. Marfan syndrome is a genetic condition that affects the body's connective tissues, making them more elastic. This can make you unusually tall, have elongated limbs, and often be extremely flexible. And some people use this as an advantage in their careers. Javier Botet was diagnosed with Marfan syndrome at a young age, but he made a name for himself in the horror film industry. He can contort his body in such an eerie and unsettling way that this has landed him roles in numerous films such as Mama, The Conjuring 2, It, and Slender Man. But Marfan syndrome is a spectrum disorder. While some people with the condition can live relatively normal lives, others may face serious health issues. Do you sometimes wish that there was less sleep so you'd have more time? Well, some of us got that blessing. While most adults need 7 to 9 hours of sleep each night, some people can function well on only 4 or 6 hours. This genetic mutation, found in a gene called DEC2, actually influences many different species, not only humans. For example, it also works on mice and fruit flies. DEC2 helps regulate circadian rhythms, the natural biological clock. This mutation affects the production of orexin, which is a hormone involved in wakefulness and maintaining the sleep-wake cycle. Basically, it helps release morning hormones earlier than usual and fades away before dawn. They discovered this gene in a family of natural short sleepers. It was a bunch of people who go to bed at a normal time, 11 p.m. to midnight, but wake up at 5 in the morning without any issue. It's a super rare mutation. It might sound like something out of a comic book, but humans can actually have super strength. Turns out, some accidental mutations can unleash titanic strength without any crazy workout routines. There are 2 proteins in our body, myostatin and activin A, that usually are secreted by muscle cells to suppress excessive growth. In other words, these 2 help regulate the size and number of your muscle cells, so you don't end up accidentally looking like Schwarzenegger. But as you can guess, some do end up like that. People with this genetic condition don't produce these proteins. Without hitting the gym, they can naturally grow their muscles extraordinarily large, resulting in super strength. It's called myostatin-related muscle hypertrophy. Sounds kinda dangerous, right? And it is. When you become a Superman, there's also the risk of muscle imbalance, heart and joint issues, and other problems.
Hey now, get ready to dive into the Sea of Mysteries, also known as the Black Sea. It is the largest inland body of water in the world, bigger than the entire state of California. It has dozens of lost ships and some secret underwater tunnels. And some people believe it's an ancient quarry that was mined out in 6 stages. The Black Sea has distinct vertical layers that don't mix, with higher and lower salinity. The salty water comes from the Mediterranean, and fresh water comes from rivers. 10 of the largest rivers in Europe flow into the Black Sea. It receives more fresh water from the rivers and rainfall than it loses from evaporation. The extra water flows through the Bosphorus into the Marmara Sea. There are 2 flows going through the straits. The upper flow leaves the Black Sea and takes surface water out of it. The bottom flow carries salt water from the Mediterranean to the Black Sea. That's why the upper layers of the Black Sea are less dense than its saltier lower layers. The oxygen that comes from the atmosphere and photosynthesis stays in the surface layers. Everything deeper than about 300 feet in the middle and up to 500 feet near the edge is not fit for life. Only certain bacteria can survive in these conditions. Although there's no air deep down in the Black Sea, the upper layer is home to around 750 species of phytoplankton. Eggs and larvae of fish and invertebrates chill in coastal regions. There are also 180 fish species in the Black Sea, and some of them are valuable, such as horse mackerel, spiny dogfish, and sprat. The water level in the Black Sea is always the same because there are no high or low tides, so the sea is always calm, quiet, and serene on the surface. But it has one surprise feature: an underwater river. It's a current of salty water flowing through the Bosphorus Strait and along the seabed. This amazing discovery was made by scientists from the University of Leeds and was announced in 2010. It's the first undersea river of its kind ever found. The river forms because salty water from the Mediterranean Sea spills through the Bosphorus Strait into the Black Sea, where the water is much less salty. The no-air zone of the sea is an ideal conservation chamber for what's hiding on its bottom. The Black Sea is like a treasure trove for shipwrecks, and we discovered it by accident. Some maritime archaeologists were studying sea levels to see how quickly the water levels rose after the last ice age, and they ran across over 40 previously unknown shipwrecks as a complete bonus. Researchers used 2 remotely operated vehicles to explore the seafloor and the wrecks. Thanks to it, we have a video and detailed 3D images of the ships that were stitched together from thousands of high-resolution photos. According to the New York Times, some of the standout discoveries among the 44 ships found include a medieval training vessel from the 13th or 14th century. Expedition members nicknamed another ship from the Ottoman Empire the Flower of the Black Sea for its beautiful petal carvings. The team also noticed unusual details on other ships, like coiled ropes, chisel marks, rudders, and other carvings. So far, they haven't announced any plans to excavate the shipwrecks, but the ships might be filled with historical treasures like books, parchments, and documents. It's worth a try to rescue them. The most extraordinary discovery in the Black Sea is what archaeologists believe to be the world's oldest intact shipwreck. It has been lying undisturbed for over 2,400 years. This ancient Greek vessel, 75 feet long, was found with its mast, rudders, and rowing benches all still in place, over a mile beneath the surface. Researchers believe the ship was a trading vessel, like those depicted on ancient Greek pottery, such as the Siren vase in the British Museum. This vase, or vase, dating from the same period, shows a vessel carrying Odysseus past the Sirens. The team took a small piece for carbon dating, and the results confirmed it as the oldest intact shipwreck known to humankind. The fact that it's so elaborate and well-preserved deserves a standing ovation for shipbuilders of the ancient world. Without microbes, worms, or other creatures to eat away the wrecks, it's no wonder the ships are in almost perfect condition. If the Titanic had sunk in these waters, we would have found it in a much better state now, not being eaten by nasty underwater microorganisms. Now, there's an interesting theory called the Black Sea Deluge hypothesis, which suggests a huge flood happened around 7,500 years ago. 2 geologists in the 1990s suggested that at the end of the last ice age, when the Earth's climate was heating up, ice sheets were melting and sea levels were rising. The Black Sea was a much smaller freshwater lake. It was separated from the Mediterranean Sea by a natural dam at the Bosphorus Strait. As global sea levels rose, the Mediterranean overflowed into the Black Sea basin. They suggest the sea level rose by 6 inches every day, flooded coastal settlements, and changed the environment for good. Samples from the Black Sea floor show a sudden shift from freshwater to marine species around that time, which means there was a rapid influx of salt water. Underwater surveys have also found what look like the old shorelines and human-made structures. So, people were living in areas now submerged by the Black Sea. Plus, the timing of this flood matches up with known patterns of human migration into Europe, Asia, and Africa. They also say this flood could be the terrible flood from the story of Noah's Ark. Critics of the deluge theory say the evidence isn't as straightforward as it seems. Some think the transition from freshwater to saltwater in the Black Sea was more gradual than one sudden flood. They're also debating if people left the settlements before they went underwater or as a result. An old chronicle that's been around for about a century says there were 2 underground tunnels starting in what is now Romania and Bulgaria and stretching all the way under the Black Sea to Turkey. Back in the day, peasants used these tunnels to move their flocks of sheep to the Ottoman Empire and countries on the Asia Minor Peninsula. Who built these tunnels and why they run under the sea is a complete mystery. At some point, the entrances to these tunnels were sealed off for national security and were under tight guard. The security forces knew all about these massive tunnels and kept them off limits. In the 1980s, a group of people working on the Danube-Black Sea Canal accidentally found another entrance to these mysterious tunnels. This one was in a cemetery in a town of Romania. Canal workers used it to regularly cross over into Bulgaria. One more cool thing about these 2 tunnels is that some people think they were built thousands of years ago. If you ever try to dig a tunnel under the sea, you'll know how tricky it is even now with all the tech we have. So if the tunnels are really that old, whoever built them was super advanced for their time. Now, there's an urban legend that says that the Black Sea has its own version of the Bermuda Triangle. Fishers describe some wild whirlpool that appears out of nowhere and drags entire flocks of birds, ships, and even small islands under the sea. And once, things got even wilder with a ship that vanished under weird conditions in 1944. It was during daylight, and some black fog with green flashing sparkles suddenly surrounded the vessel. No one has ever seen it since, and no one knows for sure if the story is true. But it sure adds a spooky touch to the mysteries of the Black Sea.
South Korea has a rich culture, but some of their museums are far from being traditional. They even have a place called Poo Poo Land. You got me right. This museum is all about feces, human gases, and more. It's 3 floors of wacky and colorful exhibits that will make your Instagram followers go wild. The bravest ones can eat out of a fake toilet pot while in this museum. But the real fun begins when it's time to leave. You'll have to slide your way out through a dark room that mimics your digestive system. South Korea houses the blackest building you'll ever see. The Vanta Black Hyundai Pavilion is covered with Vanta Black paint, which is like the ninja of all paints. It's super black and reflects less than 1% of light. The pavilion was created for the crisp, white backdrop of the 2018 Winter Olympics. Standing at 33 feet tall and 115 feet long, this building sucks up over 99.96% of light, so it's as black as a black hole. South Korea is known for its awesome cafe culture, and their Starbucks outlets are no exception. Take Starbucks Wave Seoul, for example. It literally looks like it's floating on water. This cool spot is located in Seoul Wave Art Center, a place where you can enjoy art galleries and exhibitions. If you feel like you've seen this place before, it might be because K-pop stars have filmed music videos here. Back in 2011, Tesco, the British chain, set up virtual grocery stores in subway stations and bus stops in Seoul. It's like shopping in a real store, but on your phone. Commuters can scan and buy virtual items that will be delivered right to their door. Imagine walking into a subway station and seeing walls filled with pictures of food and other items you can buy. You can just scan special QR codes with your Home Plus app and boom, your groceries are on their way to your house. Order by 1 p.m. and you'll have your stuff that same day. You must have heard about the main star of Korean cuisine. I'm talking kimchi. The real question is, where's the element of surprise? This zesty, tangy, sweet, and sour dish has been around for over 1,500 years and comes in over 200 different varieties across the country. You'll never run out of new kimchi dishes to try. It can be served as a side dish, main dish, snack, appetizer, and if you're feeling daring, even a dessert. Ever heard of kimchi and banana? Yeah, that was actually a thing for a while. By the way, they say kimchi might be perfectly matched with cheese. Actually, kimchi can be matched with pretty much anything. They even produced kimchi-flavored chocolate in Korea. Seoul, the buzzing hub of South Korea, is jam-packed with around 10 million people. You'll find narrow alleyways and bustling streets at every turn, making personal space a rare commodity. If you're strolling through the city, expect to dodge pedestrians on the sidewalk, squeeze onto crowded subway trains, and feel a bit cramped compared to the wide-open spaces in the US. South Koreans are pros at sharing public areas, so don't be surprised if someone bumps into you without apologizing. It's just part of the hustle and bustle of city life, especially in busier areas. Just roll with the punches, literally, and enjoy the lively atmosphere of Seoul. In South Korea, taking off your shoes is kind of a big deal. Some locals might even get a little miffed if you make a fuss about it. Most traditional restaurants will require you to kick off your shoes before chowing down. Make sure to keep an eye out for a shoe shelf. It's also a good idea to wear easy-on, easy-off shoes like sandals. And please, for the love of all things holy, check your socks for holes. Nobody wants to see that. PDA is not really a thing in South Korea. Even in hip cities like Seoul, you might catch a glimpse of couples holding hands while strolling the streets, but that's usually where the lovey-dovey stuff ends. Public displays of affection make South Koreans a bit uncomfortable. If you're a tourist, keep them at a minimum, even in party zones like Hongdae or Sinchon. Here's a tip for when you're dining out in South Korea. Don't wait around for the waitstaff to come to you. They won't. Instead, give a shout of "Yogiyo" to get their attention. Yep, it means over here in Korean. And if you happen to come across a self-service bar, don't be shy about picking up your own water and utensils. It's all about DIY in some places, so get ready to take matters into your own hands. South Koreans are not afraid to dive deep with their questions. I mean, people you barely know may ask about your personal life or how much dough you bring in. So if someone starts getting all up in your personal biz or you feel like they're crossing the line, just remember, they're probably just curious and looking to connect. Don't sweat it. They're not being rude, just eager to get the convo going. In the US, it's totally cool to ask chefs to switch up ingredients for allergies or preferences. But in South Korea, it's a different story. Traditional Korean dishes are cooked up with specific ingredients for hours, so don't expect them to just switch out meat for veggies. It's not that chefs are being difficult, it's just that they put a lot of effort into making that perfect dish. So when you're chowing down in South Korea, make sure you pick something that matches your dietary needs. In South Korea, toilets are seriously next-level cool. They've got cozy, heated seats. They actually play a little jam for you while you do your business, and they've got these handy wands that spray warm water to give you a nice, refreshing clean. Some of them even have built-in dryers that blow warm air to get you all nice and dry afterwards. Just like any other country, South Korea has some issues. They're facing a spy camera problem. It's still a big issue, despite tough laws. It seems like spy cameras are way too easy to get a hold of, with students even using them to film teachers and classmates. Efforts to regulate them haven't been very successful yet, but people are pushing for stricter rules and penalties. Ever been to Italy and witnessed the lively debates that turn out to be just friendly conversations with a side of dramatic arm gestures? Well, get ready for a similar revelation in Korea. Korean conversations are full of deep voices, power-packed expressions, and the occasional shock factor. That lady at the restaurant who seems like she's about to yell at you? Don't worry. She's just super excited to show you the menu. It may seem a bit overwhelming at first, but trust me, Koreans are some of the friendliest folks you'll ever meet. Soak in the melodic flow of their language and let yourself be swept away by the welcoming vibes of this vibrant culture. Still, even though the Korean language is expressive, when you hop on a bus or train in South Korea, don't be surprised if it's quieter than a library. Locals are all about their headphones, jamming out to their favorite tunes instead of chit-chatting. It's a stark contrast to the West, where everyone's gabbing away or catching up with loved ones on the phone. So if you're cruising through Seoul and feel the urge to crank up the volume and start a lively convo, think again. Being loud on public transit is a dead giveaway that you're not from around these parts. While no one will hush you outright, expect some disapproving glares and whispers from the elderly squad if you take it too far. Better keep it cool and blend in like a true South Korean, right? Mexico is huge and one of the most populated countries in the world. Over 128 million people live there. But why did more than half of them decide to pack up in this tiny strip? This area in the center of the country makes up only 18% of Mexico, and the locals have been living there for centuries. All because it seems to be the only livable place in the country. To the north, there are hot, dry deserts. Let's face it, it may be pretty hard to survive in such climatic conditions. To the south, there are jungles, and those are nightmarish. Jungles are warm and wet, so they might trick you into thinking that they'll be a cozy home for you. But it's very hard to build anything in them. The concrete won't dry because of awful unstoppable rains, and the heat messes up asphalt roads. This is why there are only 8 paved roads through the southern jungles connecting Mexico to Central America. Roads are crucial for proper life. More roads mean better and cheaper transportation, which helps people trade, do business, and make more money. But jungles have even bigger problems than just a lack of roads. Farming. Most of the nutrients in the jungle are in the plants, old wood, and decaying leaves. When these things decay, they become McDonald's-level meals for insects, fungi, and bacteria. They immediately start recycling the nutrients so fast that almost none reach the soil. With no nutrients, the soil becomes barren and useless. Oh, and we still need to clear the jungles from time to time, otherwise they may become impossible to get through. People do that by using slash and burn methods. Because of this, they often end up with poor soil that needs lots of fertilizers to grow crops. And don't forget about the ever-present jungle pests. These guys pounce on the crops, and no amount of pesticides can get rid of them forever. To make matters even worse, nearly 70% of Mexico is located in the mountains. It's one of the most mountainous countries in the world, similar to Switzerland. And mountains, just like rain, do everything in their power to prevent humanity from thriving. Building infrastructure there is nearly impossible. It requires tons of money and labor compared to flatlands. And they also make transportation between these valleys and to the coast much more challenging. Now, imagine mountains combined with the jungles. Exactly. But hold on a minute. Isn't the central strip of Mexico filled with the highest mountains in the country? This area is packed with plateaus and valleys and sits at elevations of 7,000 feet or more. This is as high as a ski resort in Aspen, Colorado. Then why in the world does everyone still live here? Turns out, these are actually good mountains. Since they're so high, they block the hotness of the desert and the tropical zones. This way, they create cooler, drier, and more temperate climates. The soil here is super fertile and great for farming, all because of the plot twist. Many of the surrounding mountains are actually volcanoes. Volcanoes, while scary, can also be super useful. They've been erupting for millions of years, and when they do that, they mix rich minerals into the soil. They're like natural fertilizer. So the land here is perfect for growing crops, especially calorie-heavy grains like corn. That's why we get so much corn or maize from Mexico. Also, many volcanic areas have natural hot springs where people can relax and enjoy a warm soak. Finally, mountains help reduce the spread of viruses and insects. This is one of the reasons why Mesoamerica became one of the first cradles of civilization in history. Thousands of years ago, the ancient city of Teotihuacan thrived here. This city reached a population of at least 125,000 people, bigger than Monaco or Liechtenstein. It was one of the largest cities in the world at the time. Back in the days of the Aztec Empire, this area was home to 5 large lakes and many rivers that provided tons of fresh water for farming. Also, people used boats to transport goods. This boosted trading and cultural growth. But living in the mountains still isn't perfect. Only about 12% of Mexico's land is good for farming, so mostly people farm in the central volcanic valleys, where they've lived for centuries. Also, because the elevation is so high, the rivers flow from the mountains to the ocean. Gravity plays its tricks, and the currents accelerate and become stronger. Because of this, there's no cheap river transport between Mexico City and the ocean. The rivers are too dangerous for the ships. Instead, people have to rely on more expensive methods like roads, railways, and airplanes. Veracruz used to be the local star port. It was the only safe and calm place on the Gulf of Mexico. Since it was the only natural harbor for miles along Mexico's flat coastline, it was super important. Not only for locals, but also a hot target for invaders. And while mountains could keep Mexico's heartland kinda safe, protecting coastal areas was harder because of them. Connecting Veracruz to Mexico City was a massive headache. And don't forget that living near volcanoes is still scary. Every now and then, they throw temper tantrums and start spewing lava, ash, and smoke everywhere. This is extremely dangerous, so locals have to evacuate to keep everyone safe. One famous volcanic event happened in 1943 with the Paricutin volcano. Imagine a farmer's surprise when a volcano suddenly erupted right in his cornfield. The volcano grew rapidly and buried 2 villages in lava and ash. Most people managed to evacuate in time, but not all of them. Another dramatic event was the eruption of El Chichon in 1982. This eruption was a big surprise and caused a lot of destruction. Finally, there's Popocatépetl volcano. In the Aztec language, this means smoking mountain. People affectionately call it El Popo. This volcano is still active and quite close to Mexico City. El Popo frequently lets off steam and ash, reminding everyone that it's very much alive. And living near El Popo means always being prepared that something might happen. Also, the reason why volcanoes are there is because the local tectonic plates are pretty active. The ground likes to move, which means that earthquakes aren't a rare occasion here either. Well, at least the climate on the Central Strip is nice, so modern construction materials like concrete and asphalt thrive here. Finally, we can build some roads, right? Oops, never mind. Because of the elevation, the locals only managed to build the first railroad in the 19th century. Meanwhile, the US had already built over 50,000 miles of tracks at the time. Can you imagine? Since Mexico is like a jigsaw puzzle of separate valleys, it's very tricky to build roads and railways through the mountains. Basically, there are no cheap ways to move goods in the country. But a few cities found a way to thrive outside the Central Strip. Chihuahua is one of the largest cities in Mexico, and it's doing pretty well. They boast good automotive and electronics industries. That's probably because it's connected to the US border, which really helps trading. Hermosillo is also located in the desert, but luckily it's right near the Gulf of California, so the temperatures aren't that awful. Plus, it helps marine trading. In this city, they even made up some advanced irrigation techniques that make the desert bloom. Also, Hermosillo is a major center for the aerospace industry. However, Mexico City still remains the life center in the country, and it's one of the world's largest megacities, with over 22 million people. But it's hard for the central government in Mexico City to control this puzzle of a country. Trading between the central valleys and the northern deserts or southern jungles is very tough, and supporting the economy may be sort of frustrating.
Now, when you think of Norway, things that come to mind are the sun that never sets in the summer, unbelievable nature, the fact that it's one of the happiest countries in the world, even white bears that freely roam in the wild. I'm guessing they're happy too. Already planning your trip to this dream country? Well, don't rush. You'll have to review your budget. Fuel there is 10 to 15% more expensive than in other Western European countries. A meal at a cafe for one person will cost at least $30. Plus, consider yourself lucky if you manage to find a hotel at $100 a night. If you Google the most expensive country in the world, you'll see this list. Switzerland, which is memishly expensive. The United States, duh, been there, know that. Luxembourg is not a surprise either. And then, all of a sudden, you see Norway. Just so you know, a family of 4 would need over $4,000 a month just to exist in Norway. And it doesn't even include rent. Specialists say that Norway is around 7% more expensive than in the US. Norway is a bit weird though. Usually the richest countries have national currencies that are stronger than the US dollar. Take Swiss francs, for example, or the Kuwaiti dinar, which is literally the boss when it comes to currencies. Like one Kuwaiti dinar can snag you $3.25 US. Now, here's where the mismatch comes. The Norwegian krone is dubbed the weakest currency in the West. Well, how come? In the wild world of global currencies, the Norwegian krone used to be a tough player known for smart money moves. But surprisingly, it is now the weakest currency in the West, taking a big hit in the last decade. It has fallen hard against the US dollar and euro, causing concern for central banks and money folks worldwide. The oil price roller coaster is a major factor in the krone's struggle, as Norway relies heavily on oil exports. But even with oil prices relatively high, it remains historically weak against major currencies. The weak Norwegian krone is affecting everyday folks too, with prices rising on almost everything due to heavy imports. Inflation is growing, leading to interest rate hikes by the Norges Bank. High interest rates are hurting the housing market and making life more expensive for Norwegian citizens. So one of the supposed reasons for why Norway is so expensive might be weak national currency. What else is particular about Norway? Well, climate for sure. It may be hard to imagine a freezingly cold country plunging into riches. It's an imagery we usually see on social media with geotags Dubai, Saudi Arabia, or even Kuwait. And it makes sense to think now that all the riches are somewhere southward, as these places have strong oil-based economies and super strong currencies. But in reality, better economies in the south are a current trend. Ever wonder why cold countries seem to be raking in the cash while the hot nations are just hanging out? Turns out, those living in chilly climates had to hustle just to survive winter. Think building shelter, stockpiling food, and keeping that fire burning. Meanwhile, those basking in the sunshine had it a little easier with hunting and foraging year-round. This theory holds true even in the land down under. Sydney and Melbourne, the top dogs in Australia's wealth game, also happen to be some of the coldest cities, while Darwin, the warmest city, is lagging behind. Some might argue that this theory doesn't hold up when we look at ancient civilizations or modern hotspots like tropical Singapore. But hey, times change, and so does wealth generation. Back in the day, it was all about farming, but now it's more about industry and innovation. So, Norway may seem to have been bound to get rich historically and geographically. Still, it's not exactly so. Norway used to struggle a lot. Back in the day, it faced some tough times with harsh winters and tricky geography. They even had famines that pushed families to seek a better life in the US. So, how did Norway go from rags to riches? Yep, oil and gas played a big role. The country is small, but it has around 0.31% of all oil reserves in the world. But in Norway, there's more to the story than just black gold. For example, the top oil reserve is not some Arabic country, but Venezuela, which claims up to 20% of the world's liquid gold. Still, Venezuela's economy is far from stable, so it's not all about oil. Although bested in forest size by other European nations, Norway was an unrivaled powerhouse in lumber during the Age of Sail. Thanks to its strategic fjord path, timber from its inland forests could quickly reach fjordside mills and global markets. As railroads unlocked larger forest potential in other countries post the 19th century, Norway was Europe's timber king, bolstered by a world-class merchant fleet by the 20th century. The Norwegian timber wealth, coupled with early cooperative societal norms, spurred growth across several sectors, from agriculture to fishing and banking. Despite being labeled poor in the 19th century, Norway's GDP per capita outshone Eastern and Southern European nations. The nation's ascendancy continues beyond the discovery of its oil reserves. Norway is unique, with a small population but sprawling land. Despite its vastness, the Nordics are scattered and considered one of the most spacious countries globally. Much of the North's territory stretches beyond the Arctic Circle, offering harsh landscapes with thin topsoil covering the bedrock. The tough terrain in Norway, full of mountains and with a short growing season, limits arable land to only 2.2%, similar to Yemen. The scattered arable land in small valleys makes extensive farming impractical, a far cry from the efficient farming in the U.S. With a huge chunk of land and coastlines, but a small population, Norway makes some serious cash from its reserves. Plus, nature has been pretty kind to Norway, with rich fishing grounds, hydropower from rivers, and power from cold waters. And only then comes the little thing called oil. The late 50s saw a big discovery that changed everything for Norway's economy. Fast forward to today, and petroleum activities have been a major game changer for Norway, feeding its economic growth and funding its welfare state. But Norway didn't just sit back and watch the money flow in. They made smart moves, like creating a sovereign wealth fund to manage their oil wealth for the long haul. The fund sees some big bucks, currently standing at 1.7 billion Norwegian kroner, or over 160 million US dollars. Norway uses the interest from this fund to boost its annual budget, ensuring top-notch healthcare, education, and welfare for its citizens. And here's the kicker: Norway's not resting on its laurels. They're investing in sustainable technologies, like offshore wind power, to secure a bright future beyond oil and gas. Now, Norway may be expensive, but it can't compete with the world's costliest place to live, Monaco. It's almost 4 times more expensive than the global average. So, if you're looking to rub elbows with the rich and famous, look no further than Monaco. With property prices soaring to an average of over $50,000 per square meter in 2022, it's no wonder why this tiny country is a magnet for the la-di-da. However, there's a place that's particularly expensive for tourists, and I'm not talking about tourist traps. Neither Oslo nor Monaco can beat the prices in, well, take a second to make your guess. Ready? Welcome to Ashgabat, Turkmenistan's capital. A gallon of milk costs a whopping $15 US, while a standard internet subscription plan will set you back $168 US a month. Calm down, you're not poor, it's just an economic glitch. The reason for these prices is simple. The Turkmen national currency exchange rate in relation to dollars is fixed and never changes. $1 equals 3.5 manats, and it's been so since 2015. Local prices in the local currency grew to inflation, making it not proportionate to prices in dollars. The exchange rate never changes. So if you live there, such prices don't seem to be extraordinary. But if you come with dollars, you're in for a pricey trip. Would you like a professional stylist to fold your luggage, a private chef to cook meals just for you, and an entire plane to transport your TV set that didn't fit in your private jet? That's pretty much the everyday travel reality for the top 0.1% of U.S. earners who made around $3 million per year in 2022. Compare that to the regular salary of a working American of around $60,000. And then there's the top 1% who made around $800,000 the same year. If you want to travel like the richest people in the world, forget about chilling at one luxury hotel with shampoo made of gold for 2 weeks. The latest trend in upscale traveling is surf and turf. Rich guests spend a week on a sleek yacht after staying at a luxury hotel, or the other way around. Boat sales have surged in recent years, and the rich love to charter sailboats for $25,000 a week to as much as $90,000. It's a great way to get away from the common folk, you know. Everything is pre-planned by their travel agents, so they don't have to worry about a thing. The ultra-wealthy can often opt for private islands or buy out entire hotels. For instance, a villa on a private island off the Cannes coast in France will cost you around $290,000 a week. It's in high demand, a reasonable price to pay for the absence of neighbors or traffic. And if you do miss the hustle and bustle at some point, you can always hop on a speedboat and dance the night away at one of the luxurious beach clubs. In 2023, Greece became the top destination for the richest 1% of travelers. Paros Island was the most mentioned new favorite. Italian Sicily lost its charm to them because it's overvisited by the White Lotus fans. And it's not just about the Four Seasons-operated San Domenico Palace, where the show is based, but the entire island. For winter fun, there's always Aspen and ski towns in the European wonderland, like Switzerland and France. They have exclusive hotels, Michelin-starred restaurants, high-end shops, and chalets that look richer and more luxurious than an average family house. If there's no natural snow, the artificial snow system solves the problem. Some of the best hotels have direct access to lifts that take guests to the main skiing slopes. For those who aren't fans of the European resorts, there are always the Seychelles, where you can rent a villa for about $11,000 per night at a private island resort. George and Amal Clooney like to come here. Those who don't find it cool or exclusive enough go to Antarctica by private jet from Cape Town. The trip that lasts less than 24 hours costs $195,000. Richard Branson prefers to take his vacations to a private Necker Island, is part of the British Virgin Islands, and has some beautiful wildlife around it to explore. Guests rent the whole place for $80,000 per night. There's enough room for 34 people, but not all billionaires like to share, you know. People who are among the world's richest like to be at events where they can meet like-fortuned ones. Events like the World Economic Forum in Davos, where a standard steak will cost you $150 and a drink will be $40. Then there are horse races, Miami or Singapore yacht shows, or Dubai International Boat Show. For those who love movies or showing off their lavish dresses, the Sundance Film Festival in Utah, the Cannes Film Festival in France, or Venice International Film Festival in Italy could be good options. Sports lovers travel to events like the US Open Golf Tournament and other golf cups, the Wimbledon Tennis Tournament in the UK, the Melbourne Cup in Australia, or the Monaco Grand Prix for those who love speed and expensive cars. Those who can't live without style and like to be trendsetters don't miss fashion weeks in New York, London, Milan, and Paris. For music and crazy luxurious building lovers, there are always opera balls, like the one in Vienna, Austria, or La Scala Opera House opening night in Milan, Italy. And then, of course, there are special events like birthdays. When she was turning 22, billionaire Kylie Jenner rented a super yacht for over $1 million per week. An average person would have to save up for years to rent this vessel, even for one day. Okie dokie. So they need to find a way to get to their deluxe point B, right? Well, more and more people opt for private jets. You can fly at any time, even during restrictions on commercial air travel, to any place. And you won't have to choose between chicken or pasta when the flight attendant finally reaches your seat, 35D. There are around 22,000 business aircraft worldwide, and the number is only going up. Most of these jets are in the US, and Brazil takes the second place. Germany is the leader in Europe and only ranks 5th on the global list. Now, if for some reason they aren't traveling to their destination by a private jet and decide to share first class with other passengers, they'll at least need to ship their luggage instead of taking it on the plane with them. The luggage of the wealthy gets picked up from their door and awaits them at the luxurious suite or yacht on the other side of the journey. And if they want it to be done within one day, they need to pay hundreds of dollars for one bag. By the way, you don't expect them to pack their bags all by themselves, do you? It's much easier to hire someone for thousands of dollars to go through all that trouble. A professional stylist picks all the clothes that will look picture perfect and then rolls the items, puts them in bags, and makes lists of what's inside and what goes with what. The clothes aren't included in the stylist compensation, of course, so they add another $1,000 or $10 to the vacation grand total. Although the ultra-rich travelers can afford to rent any car while traveling, not all of them like to sit in a vehicle that belongs to someone else. That's why they choose to ship their own luxurious cars to their destination. It costs around $36,000 to fly a Porsche from Dubai to London with Emirates. It's enough money to buy a brand new family hatchback in the UK, but most billionaires don't like this type of vehicle. Some wealthy travelers don't trust commercial airlines and prefer to charter a cargo plane to transport their vehicles. Sometimes they take a whole bunch of cars, motorbikes, and other expensive toys. Covered trucks in the country of destination transport all this beauty to the client's address or a garage of their choice. Owners don't like stranger delivery drivers to add miles to their shiny vehicles. This whole delivery service costs several millions. Some cars have only sentimental value for their own and are worth way less than their deluxe delivery. One really well-off man even hired a cargo plane for his Samsung TV that couldn't fit through the door of his jet. Oh, rich people's problems. They can afford to eat at any restaurant in the world, but it would be too mainstream, so they prefer to bring their private chefs on vacation. These professional cooks know their clients' diets and health goals. For luxury travelers, consistency and routine are too important to trade them for public restaurants. For chefs, it's often a chance to travel for free and get a good salary at the same time. Sometimes the clients will even fly the family of the chef with them if traveling happens over the holidays. This job has high demands and can be really stressful with varied working hours. Sometimes they have to spontaneously cook dinners for 16 people or find rare ingredients at locations with basic grocery stores. And of course, everything they overhear during meals must remain a top secret. Shh. Dubai is glamorous by design. In 1966, this fellow went all out to transform a sleepy fishing village into a shiny metropolis brimming with skyscrapers. It was all founded on oil money. Investors and expats started pouring into the city year by year. And now, Dubai houses indoor ski resorts, outdoor water parks, drone-controlled weather, futuristic gardens, and floating tennis courts. But is everything as bright as it seems? The city is built on shifting sands in a desert where temperatures can exceed 115 degrees Fahrenheit. Could Dubai be that catastrophic cautionary tale waiting to happen? It might be, or it might not. Let's find out. Well, one of the most questionable projects of this emirate might indeed be in danger. I'm talking about Dubai's artificial islands off the coast. Built from sand dragged up from the seabed, they're part of a super ambitious plan to create resorts and residential homes for the ultra-rich. But at the moment, most of these islands are largely abandoned, and their market collapsed. And the worst thing? Well, no one expected such an outcome. They're already sinking back into the sea. Let's take a closer look at these wonder islands. There are the 3 Palm Islands, Palm Jumeirah, Palm Jebel Ali, and Palm Deira, an archipelago of 300 small islands called the World, and a final set of tiny islands designated after constellations, the Universe. The construction started in the year 2000 with the Palm Islands. The main goal was to create one more oasis within the oasis of Dubai, with more shops and more luxury goods, more resorts and hotels, more restaurants, and more beaches. The Palm Islands, for example, have mansion-like houses built in contemporary styles within gated communities. It turns out they're meant to mimic the Hollywood Hills lifestyle. At the moment, Palm Jumeirah is the most developed one out of all of them and has functioning businesses, homes, and hotels. The other 2 Palm Islands are reported to be rather underdeveloped, if not desolate. As for the Universe archipelago, it hasn't even gotten underway, but at the same time, It's supposed to be finished by 2028. The world archipelago has been encountering one issue after another during its development. The problems were mostly related to using sand from the ocean to build the islands. Erosion from water and wind started eating away at the islands from day one. But that's not the only problem. To make matters worse, rising ocean levels are threatening to swallow them completely. Plus, economic problems that started in 2008 haven't let up yet. But let's delve into details to see how truly disastrous the whole venture is. Palm Jumeirah, the only successful set of islands so far, is literally sinking at a rate of 5 millimeters per year. It turns out that sand piled on the ocean floor isn't all that great for sustaining the weight of hundreds and thousands of tons of human-made structures. So, Dubai's islands sink, the ocean level rises, that's clear. But couldn't the engineers behind these magnificent projects predict such an outcome? Apparently not. Wave breakers surrounding the islands have a height of a mere 6.5 feet. That's well below any serious protective height. Water erosion also removes between 353,000 to 530,000 cubic feet of sand per year. And these numbers are going to grow as global warming makes weather and ocean tides more severe. We should also mention the ecological problems the construction of the islands provoked. For one thing, in the process, too many natural resources were used, which led to the decline of biodiversity and the extinction of wildlife and vegetation. The islands are extremely harmful to marine life and the ecosystem. Dubai uses loads and loads of energy and natural resources. The average water consumption in Dubai in 2019 was 145 gallons per person per day, the highest consumption rate of any country. 98% of this water comes from desalination plants, which uses a tremendous amount of fossil fuels. Plus, the extensive use of marine sand and sediment to build the islands had catastrophic consequences for the local ecosystem. During the construction, the waters became clouded with silt, stifling once abundant sea inhabitants. For example, oyster beds have been covered with 2 inches of sediment. Now, let's have a closer look at one of the projects, the World Islands, and find out the deepest secrets behind them. The construction was launched in the early 2000s. Since then, the project has been surrounded by a veil of rumors, from celebrity purchases to outlandish hotel projects. For many years, the chances of completion seemed slim after the islands were left mostly abandoned following the financial crisis in 2008. One of the UAE's most ambitious projects almost turned into a ghost town. At the same time, Dubai's reputation as a luxury vacation destination and investment hub has been growing, and it had its impact on the once abandoned World Islands. For example, global hotel group Anantara opened the doors to a 70-room resort called Anantara World Islands Dubai Resort. Don't you think it gives a new buzz of hope for this destination? So, what exactly are the World Islands? They sit around 2.5 miles off the coast of Dubai in the Persian Gulf. It's a collection of small islands replicating the world in miniature. Each island has its own name corresponding to a certain country. The archipelago was created by Dubai-based company Nakheel Projects. The name is linked to many high-profile projects, including the St. Regis Dubai and the Palm. The artificial islands were built by pulling sand from the Gulf and moving it to the designated spot. Several million tons of rock were used to keep it in place. In total, there are 300 islands, and each is from 250 to 900 square feet. At this point, more than $14 billion have already been spent on the construction. The developers had to deal with a lot in the process. Besides the chaos of work halting, there were also rumors that the World Islands were sinking back into the ocean. For many, the Heart of Europe project was the most convincing. Its development will see a certain number of the islands in the world transformed into the continent of Europe. It's planned to be done to such an extent that fake weather conditions with rain and snow might be created in some areas. The heart of Europe includes the construction of several luxurious hotels, private mansions, and even floating villas. Each of these villas is designed to transport people to different European destinations, including Venice, Sweden, Monaco, and Germany. This ambitious project is still under development, and the group is looking for potential investors. But the most exciting World Islands project is probably the Antero World Islands Dubai Resort that I mentioned before. Located in the South America region of the islands and having a great view over the main city, it opened in 2021. The resort's accommodations include suites, beach villas, and pool villas. At the moment, it's the only open resort on the entire archipelago, which gives it a sense of seclusion and privacy. Interestingly, the development and purchase opportunities remain a closely guarded secret. There was an old listing on one internet site for the entire collection back to when the World Islands was just an intriguing project. But later, there was only one individual island left for sale. Which island it wasn't disclosed, but the listing advertised it as a 505,000 square foot undeveloped island, and the price they wanted for it was $16 million. It may seem like a hefty sum considering the problems associated with the World Islands project, but the islands may easily increase in value if the Antero Resort lives up to everyone's expectations. By the way, if you want to own a piece of the World Islands but can't find any for sale, look into private purchase opportunities within the heart of Europe. This project offers its investors the opportunity to buy either a second home on one of its resort islands, including luxury mansions and villas, or an incredibly exclusive private island. I wonder, what about grocery shopping? As far as I know, the infrastructure is lacking there. I mean, do they even have DoorDash? Or do you have to walk all the way to the nearest luxury hotel to have breakfast? On the other hand, considering the price you're paying for property there, splurging on breakfast shouldn't be your biggest concern.
From tiny islands to giant cities fanning out for dozens of miles, you're gonna learn about the most densely populated places on Earth. It'll make you question the limits of the impossible. To what lengths are people ready to go in their search of a better life, or simply trying to survive? The list of such places includes both Hong Kong and the Maldives, the Egyptian city of Tanta, and a tiny island in Lake Victoria in Africa. Let's find out more about how people manage to live there. Hong Kong has an official population of 7.5 million people, and this number is expected to reach 8.5 million by 2041. The density of the city's population is more than 18,000 people per square mile. Despite a rather low birth rate, the population of Hong Kong is on the rise. This paradox has an explanation. A lot of people immigrate to Hong Kong all the time because of all the opportunities this city offers, like various jobs. The city has an incredibly high price of land. It's one of the main reasons for its high-density development. People with low and even middle incomes can only afford to live in high-rise buildings, and Hong Kong has more than 9,000 of those. Plus, there are more than 300 buildings that are over 490 feet in height. It's more than New York, Shanghai, and Dubai can boast. Hong Kong's incredible growth as one of the tallest cities in the world has a lot to do with its incredible urban planning. At the same time, housing is unbelievably expensive in this region. Median home costs are 18 times the median annual income. That's the reason why less fortunate residents live in the so-called coffin houses, where apartments are tinier than a standard parking space in the USA. Take Quarry Bay, for example, a densely packed neighborhood in eastern Hong Kong, and its monster building. It's actually not one building, but a group of 5 connected constructions. There are more than 2,200 units in these 5 blocks, and rumor has it that it houses around 10,000 people. Despite such cramped living conditions most Hong Kong's inhabitants have to deal with, the city is home to several dozen billionaires. Look, This is half a football field. And that's what 1/3 of Bill Gates' home looks like. Another example for you. 2/5 of the White House. These are not random numbers. That's the territory of Migingo Island, located in Lake Victoria between Kenya and Uganda. Over 100 people live on this tiny piece of land. Don't you think that those metal-tiled roofs make the island look like a huge turtle floating on the water? Unfortunately, because of the island's small size, there's barely any vegetation there. Most of the surface of the island is covered with rocks, except for this tiny area. It's covered with grass and hosts not more than 5 shrubs. The island is all about fish and fishing. The landing point turns into a fish market every day at noon. The trade doesn't last long. It usually finishes at 2 p.m. when the boat leaves. The only thing the inhabitants of the island have is fish. So every morning, they get essential supplies for small businesses from Kenya. That's why you can buy everything you need in local stores, from food to fishing equipment. The inhabitants of the island not only catch fish but also gut them on the rocks and then fry and eat them in cafes. Yep, there are around 13 cafes and bars on the islands where people eat, play dice, and cook ugali, a typical dish made from maize flour. Back to giant cities and busy streets. Welcome to Shenzhen, the most densely populated city in China. This city hosts around 17.5 million people. With so many inhabitants, the city faces loads of challenges. For example, overcrowded schools and beaches. Speaking of the latter, some areas even implement a booking system to manage beach crowds. The most astonishing thing about this megapolis is that it's grown to its current size within a mere 40 years or so. It used to be a fishing village, but then, thanks to the support of the authorities and the city's close proximity to Hong Kong, it turned into a bustling financial and economic center. These days, it has the status of one of the busiest container ports in the world, along with Shanghai and Singapore. Shenzhen also has had the fastest growth in millionaires over the last 10 years, 140%. Such an increase is far greater than in the first-tier cities in China, including Beijing and Shanghai. Islet Abrui is a Caribbean island that forms part of Haiti, and it's one of the most densely populated islands in the world. Around 500 people living there share an area of a mere 0.4 hectares. You might think this is just another fishing village, but Islet Abrui is more like a factory. Once you set foot on this island, you'll instantly see a maze of alleyways. Follow them, walking past crooked thatch and tarp-covered huts, and you'll eventually find yourself in the center of town. The main landmarks are 2 concrete buildings, and one of them is a store. In the middle, you'll see a modest town square equipped with 2 solar streetlights. One is old and is no longer in use, and the other is shiny and new. On the island, men outnumber women and kids. Many people are out of town fishing during the day. The horizon surrounding the island is dotted with sails and pirogues. The rest remain on the island doing other jobs, like repairing boats, mending nets and traps, and preparing tons of fish for shipment to Haiti and other places. As for kids, they spend their days swimming. Our last destination is the Egyptian city of Tanta, which is also one of the most densely populated places in the world. It has about 70,000 people per square mile. Just for comparison, there are slightly under 30,000 people per square mile in New York. The city is located between Cairo and Alexandria. It has huge cotton plantations, and in 1856 it became a stop on the railway network, mostly for exporting the cotton growing in the area to Europe. And even though the area around Tanta was mostly fields, the settlement turned into a large, crowded city. In late October, the city becomes the center of celebration of the cotton harvest. 3 million people come from around the Delta and other parts of the Arab world for the colorful 8-day celebration. Tanta is famous for its sweet candy. It's made of gelatin, coconut, sesame, peanuts, and chickpeas. Loads of these sweets are sold during festivals when many Egyptians visit the city. No wonder they've been considered a delicacy since the 1800s. Tanta also has a lot of cotton processing factories, as well as textile industries. Plus, it's a university town. Tanta University was established in 1972. Male, the capital of the Maldives, has a population of more than 200,000 people. It means 49,000 people per square mile. 80% of the land sits around 4 feet above sea level, which means that if part of the islands go underwater, people will have to relocate. An artificial island that was created to manage waste is getting overburdened. In 1997, Hula Male, another artificial island, was built to alleviate dramatic population pressure. These days, it's already as developed as Male. The Maldives consists of more than 1,000 islands stretching along a 500-mile axis. All of them are coral islands. They grew around the rims of prehistoric undersea volcanoes. Only 188 islands are inhabited, but most of them have fewer than 1,000 residents. More and more Maldivians are giving up on island life and moving to the capital city. But Male is already pressed hard against the limits of human habitation. If even more people move there, its physical structure would need to be completely reworked. The authorities are already surrounding Male with sea bridges and artificial islands packed with houses.
A mega drought might hit Australia soon, and this isn't just about a couple of dry seasons. We're talking about 20 years of little or no rain. While Australia could be facing the longest and most devastating drought since official records began, the rest of the world might struggle to buy bread, flour, or cereals. Energy prices are likely to spike globally, and neighboring countries like New Zealand, Indonesia, and Malaysia must be prepared to receive Australians directly affected by the lack of water. To truly understand how severe this situation could become, we should first examine past disasters. First off, Australia is no stranger to droughts, and this phenomenon can happen across their entire territory. From 2017 to 2019, the southeast part of the country went through what they call the tinderbox drought. This was a severe bone-dry event where the cooler months saw only about half the usual rainfall. Parts of Australia became so dry that wildfires were a constant threat. Crops failed, and water was scarce. This drought was also thought to have contributed to the Black Summer fire disaster. By the end of 2019, bushfires were raging across the country on a scale never seen before, with people describing them as rivers of lava flowing down from treetops. The losses were staggering. The tourist industry alone took a hit of $2.8 billion, and over 7,000 jobs disappeared as a result of this difficult period. The tinderbox drought was a big reminder of what Australia might face in the future. That's why it's so important to understand what happened in the past to get a full picture of a possible 20-year mega drought. But there is one problem. Even though droughts are relatively common in Australia, the rainfall data available until today isn't enough for researchers to predict the future, and our records only go back to around 1900. So experts decided to study tree rings to uncover missing environmental data. If you look at a tree stump, you'll notice concentric rings on its surface. As trees grow, they form new rings, and the thickness of these rings depends on how much water they get. During a mega drought, the rings appear thinner because the trees don't have much water. Unfortunately, these natural records usually only go back a few hundred years, and it only tells us about specific local conditions, not the situation across all of Australia. So, experts turn to computer models to simulate how Earth's climate changed from the year 850 to 2000. This approach helped them to paint a picture of when megadroughts might have occurred in Australia and how to predict what might happen in the future. But what they were really interested in was whether the human factor might be making this scenario worse over the years and if we are somehow intensifying these dry periods. So, are we to blame for these mega droughts? The short answer is, we're not sure yet. On one hand, dry periods in Australia do seem to last longer than they did before factories and machines became common. On the other hand, they don't seem to be getting more intense or happening more often than before industrial times. This means a drought lasting 20 years might not be directly linked to human activities. Actually, this kind of phenomenon is just a normal part of how rainfall changes in Australia over time. This is backed up by evidence from ice cores, which suggests that a 39-year drought hit eastern Australia around 800 years ago. What makes it all so fascinating is that there isn't just one cause for this phenomenon. I mean, there is no single mechanism that explains all cases of megadroughts. It happens because the right combination of ocean and atmospheric conditions come together, and you end up with a drought. And just by random chance, you might have periods where there are 100-year-long droughts. Despite what many people think, megadroughts are not geographically isolated. They have occurred on every continent except Antarctica over the past 2,000 years, and are often linked to natural events. For instance, megadroughts in North America and Southwest South America were driven by El Niño, where the Pacific Ocean near the equator gets warmer than usual, disturbing normal weather patterns. They are not rare events either. In fact, the U.S. Southwest has been experiencing a megadrought since 2000. It's being considered the driest period in 1,200 years for the region. Major reservoirs like Lake Mead and Lake Powell are at low levels. Heat waves are hitting cities like Phoenix and Las Vegas harder than ever, and wildfires are happening more frequently as the land gets drier. Now, let's think about the future. Even though we have a very recent and concrete example from the U.S., research can't exactly predict how a 20-year megadrought would play out in Australia. Usually, such events show up mainly as reduced rainfall and snowfall. But in most areas, the increase in drought risk will be caused by a warmer, more arid atmosphere. So the ground will probably look parched and cracked, rivers and lakes will likely shrink, and the sky will be relentlessly clear and blue, with barely a cloud in sight. Farmers might struggle to grow crops, making grocery prices rise worldwide. Things like bread, flour, and cereals may become scarcer, as Australia supplies about 13% of global wheat exports. Coal mines might be affected, as they depend on water for extraction, washing, and processing. That might drive up power costs for industries around the world, which could be passed on to consumers, impacting global growth and inflation. As cities might face water shortages, Australians will likely find new ways to conserve every drop or maybe move to New Zealand or Southeast Asia. Now, you're probably thinking, when is this big event going to happen? Honestly, it's really hard to predict exactly. Megadroughts can happen every 150 to 1,000 years, but experts think Australia should be ready for one to happen in the next 10 years or so. And this possibly should be taken seriously. This phenomenon has been known to contribute to the collapse of entire civilizations. Take the Akkadians of Mesopotamia, who built the world's first empire more than 4,000 years ago. Studies of moisture at the ruins of Akkadian cities suggest that they experienced a massive drought lasting 300 years, and this may have led to their collapse. A similar thing happened to the Assyrian Empire, which existed over 2,700 years ago, in what is now northern Iraq. For years, it was a real mystery why they left their capital of Nineveh and never returned. But recent studies of a stalagmite in the Cunaba cave revealed that the rise and fall of the empire coincided with a wet period followed by a 125-year-long mega-drought. Because they were very dependent on seasonal rain for agriculture, this dry period made their life much harder. Even though experts now believe they probably left because of the dryness, the question of where they went is still a mystery. So, yep, mega-droughts may have played a role in the collapse of great civilizations in the past. But on the positive side, we've come a long way since then, and recent climate technologies can help us prepare for events like this. Now that we know a 20-year megadrought is very much possible and might happen soon, Australia has some time to get ready for it. Developing strong water management plans to mitigate the severe impacts of a megadrought is more than necessary, and it's also important to create community support networks to provide emotional and financial support to people, particularly farmers, who are more affected directly by this event. If initiatives like these emerge in the coming years, those 20 years of drought could be less intense than most people might expect.
Meet Hulamale, also known as the City of Hope. This nickname makes total sense since this artificial island is part of the Maldives' big plan to avoid being completely submerged in the near future. Hulamale was created by placing sand from the seafloor onto a submerged coral platform, and it worked. This city sits about 6 feet above sea level, which means it's twice as high as the Maldives' capital, Male. While more and more people are moving there to live, the island was also designed to serve as a temporary evacuation site during dangerous storms and typhoons. Seychelles is another gem in the Indian Ocean that's at risk of disappearing. Unfortunately, coastal flooding is becoming a common issue there, especially during spring tides and heavy rainfall. The problem is that their main island, Mahé, hosts about 90% of the country's population. Along the coast, it's only about 6 feet above sea level. Fiji is the third tropical paradise on our list, and it's also a top pick for travelers. But this nation is in a tough spot, since it's located right in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, where huge storms can really turn things into chaos. Take Cyclone Winston. It hit Fiji back in 2016 and ended up costing them over $1 billion in damage. So one thing they're doing to protect themselves is planting mangroves along the coast and preserving the ones that already exist. These trees are awesome since they help reduce wind speed during cyclone emergencies and also combat erosion by trapping sediments. Egypt might be in trouble too. I mean, it's not like the whole country is going to be underwater and we'll only see the tips of the pyramids in a few years. But things could really change for them as coastal cities are facing a serious risk. Take Alexandria, for instance. 45% of its population already lives below sea level. If the city is flooded, not only will everyone have to move, but Egypt in general will suffer a major impact on its fish production. In Europe, one of the most at-risk populations is in the Netherlands, where about half the people live in areas below sea level. In the future, planning a romantic gesture with tulips for your girlfriend could become an impossible mission. The Netherlands is responsible for 2/3 of the world's tulip production. So if fields are taken over by saltwater, it's game over for the blooms. But the good news is that the Dutch have centuries of experience dealing with water, so knowing how to work with storm barriers and seawalls can prevent them from a doomsday scenario. The risks of rising sea levels probably aren't higher anywhere else than here in Tuvalu. This island chain, located halfway between Australia and Hawaii, could be the first state to become uninhabitable. Its stunning land is only about 9 feet above sea level. And just by looking at it on the map, you can see how narrow it is. In fact, the narrowest part in Fongafale is only about 65 feet wide. So even before higher tides become a real problem, the country's limited farmland could be flooded with saltwater. The next country on our list is the Philippines. This archipelago in Southeast Asia boasts some of the most stunning scenery, but it faces the risk of flooding for 2 reasons. First, due to rising sea levels, and second, because of crazy, unpredictable weather. Since 1990, events like cyclones, earthquakes, and tsunamis have cost the country over $20 billion. Have you ever heard of Vanuatu? This chain of islands, spread out between Australia and Fiji, could be flooded soon. Vanuatu was one of the first Pacific nations to relocate an entire community to a safer spot. Back in 2005, residents living in risky coastal areas of the northern island of Tegua moved to higher ground. Next up, the Marshall Islands, a country located in the Central Pacific. Studies show that 40% of the buildings in the capital city, Majuro, could end up underwater in the future. But this country isn't throwing in the towel just yet. They've got a game plan. They are fortifying the infrastructures of their low-lying airport, relocating key buildings to higher ground, and putting up seawalls on rural islands. Heading south, we've got Nauru. This is actually one of the smallest countries in the world, covering just 8.1 square miles. Today, it's home to 10,000 people, but it's on the brink of becoming uninhabitable. Water levels are rising about 3 times faster there than the global average. The Buada Lagoon sparks special concern since it's the only surface freshwater resource, and it's located only 16 feet above sea level. Our next stop in the Pacific Ocean is the Republic of Palau. Rising sea levels are no joke for them either, but protecting their crops, especially taro, is a priority at this moment. About halfway between Hawaii and New Zealand lies Samoa, and this country is dealing with a unique situation. Not only is the volume of water increasing there, but their land is also sinking. You see, a couple of strong earthquakes and tsunamis hit Samoa back in 2009. So as the crust bounces back to its original position, the overall land surface is actually going down. Because of this, their housing and main infrastructure could take a serious hit, especially since all their airports are along the coast. Let's head to Kiribati. This Pacific nation has a big problem with frequent flooding because most of its people and infrastructure are near the coast. Apart from the volcanic island of Banaba, none of Kiribati's land is more than 6.5 feet above the ocean. To tackle this situation and keep their population safe, they had this big idea of making a massive floating platform, kind of like the ones oil companies have. But the problem is that it would cost them a fortune, as the project is estimated to be around $2 billion. If visiting Vietnam is on your bucket list, you better hurry up. The top 10 things to do there mostly involve cruising to jaw-dropping spots like down to Ha Long Bay, also known as the Descending Dragons Bay. But by 2050, the surrounding land over there might be underwater. Another huge problem Vietnam is facing is that the main rice fields are getting salty. And if you're into Vietnamese food, you know how important rice is for them. Right now, they're especially concerned about the Mekong Delta region being vulnerable. After all, this is a highly fertile area responsible for most of Vietnam's agricultural output, with over 50% of it being, rice. This nation is really putting in the effort to adjust to this new reality. They're flushing the rice fields in the Mekong Delta with fresh water to get rid of the saltiness. Our next stop is in the Caribbean Sea. Grenada is an island country, but you may know it as the Island of Spice, since its tropical climate is just perfect for cultivating things like nutmeg, cinnamon, cloves, and ginger. Unfortunately, Grenada and its incredible fertile soil also face an uncertain future of being submerged. Let's talk about the last country on our list, the Solomon Islands. 5 islands in this archipelago have already vanished beneath the waves, and 6 others are submerged by 20%. They include the Nusa Evili Island, which was once a hotspot to go to for a picnic in the early 2000s. Even though the situation is complicated, it's important to note that more than 300 of the islands there are inhabited. One thing about the Solomon Islands is that it seems like they're always in some kind of recovery mode, since the country often gets hit by tropical cyclones and flash floods. Their population is already working hard to save their homes from the rising seas by building stone walls along the coast, planting mangroves, and constructing houses in higher areas.
Most rivers in the world flow into the sea, but the Okavango in Africa takes its massive waters right into the Kalahari Desert. And it looks like this river manages to do the impossible and defies gravity. The Okavango starts in the highlands of Angola, runs for 1,000 miles like any other normal river, and then drops into the largest inland delta on Earth, known as the Okavango Swamp. The delta has land slopes dropping at nearly 150 feet, which is about half as tall as the Statue of Liberty. The area where the Okavango Delta is now used to be part of a lake that dried up around 2,000 years ago. It takes the Okavango water several months to complete its journey, and the landscape there is never the same. The first European to have found the delta was the Scottish explorer David Livingstone. Yeah, the Dr. Livingstone, I presume, guy? That's him. When he first saw it, he was shocked as he noticed that the water seemed to be flowing backward and even uphill. He saw two strong watercourses connecting the Okavango to the wetland systems to the east. Decades later, other explorers saw them completely dry. Several years later, the watercourses were full again, and they kept emptying and filling up, sometimes changing direction. Scientists managed to explain this mystery when they found a hidden network of faults, part of the Great Rift Valley, under the sand. When major earthquakes happen, like the one in Indonesia in 2004, the Earth sets off a chain reaction. Tiny cracks underground shift just enough to send a trickle of water down the river, and a flood begins, raising the water levels. Plus, in May and June, when winter begins in the southern hemisphere, floods bring more fresh water and life to the swamp. Islands get submerged completely during the peak floods and then resurface again at the end of the wet season. Wildlife just loves all the water in the delta, and you can often see migratory elephants bathing among pink lily pads and silverfish, bream, barbels, and other fish. There are lions, cheetahs, buffalo, wildebeests, hippopotamuses, hippopotami, zebras, wild dogs, crocodiles, and other species of animals. Storks, ibis, herons, cranes, and geese like to fly by, along with 450 species of birds. Although the Okavango has plenty of water that is priceless in the desert, people hardly settle along its banks. One big problem here is the tsetse fly. But if you're feeling adventurous, you can come here for a water safari. Scientists from Imperial College in London stumbled upon a totally unexpected river under the Antarctic ice sheet. It slurps up water from an area as big as Germany and France combined. Scientists used to think the lakes under the Antarctic ice were just chilling by themselves. But now it turns out they're part of an interconnected river network. Water under the ice can form in two ways, either from melted snow seeping down or from the Earth's natural heat and the ice grinding over the ground. The Antarctic gets a lot of surface melting during the summer, but Antarctica is usually too chilly for that. This newly found river is proof that there's plenty of water down there just from the ice melting from below. This river could make Antarctica lose its icy cover way faster. If things heat up enough to melt the surface, that water could rush down and mess with the base of the ice sheet, turning Antarctica into a melting mess like Greenland. If the ice starts moving faster than the water can handle, it's going to create more friction, making even more water and speeding up the melting process. The researchers are on a mission to dig deeper into how this river system works and see if it's causing trouble in other parts of the icy continent. Understanding what's going on down there could give us a heads up on how a changing Antarctica might shake up the whole planet. The Roe River in Montana flows for just a bit over 200 feet between Giant Springs and the Missouri River. It was mentioned in the Guinness Book of World Records as the shortest river in the world, but they had to remove this category altogether because there was some heated debate over this title. Residents of Oregon claim that their D River was the absolute champion, as it all depends on when you measure them. There could even be shorter rivers in Norway or Indonesia, depending on what you see as a river. The official definition says it's something that has constant flowing water in the form of a current and is fed by upland sources or another river, lake, or watershed. Creeks and brooks flow together to form streams. Streams become rivers, and rivers take the water from higher to lower lands, ending in the ocean. There are 12 stream orders, and the first two levels don't have other streams feeding them. So, Roe and its other short buddies technically deserve the title of rivers. I'm glad we cleared that up. Rio Negro in South America is the largest blackwater river in the world and the largest left tributary of the Amazon jungle. Its waters look more like strong tea and seem pitch black only from the distance. They get that dark color from humic acid. When plants containing phenol break down only halfway, they leave behind this tea-like hue. Some people believe that blackwater rivers can't be productive, but Rio Negro helps big fishing industries and has spots where turtles come to lay their eggs. Back in the 17th century, explorers didn't find tons of indigenous folks along the river. But it probably didn't have to do with its productivity. more with diseases and conflicts. There are around 700 different fish species documented in Rio Negro's basin, including at least 100 you won't find anywhere else. A bunch of those fish end up in aquariums, like the super popular cardinal tetra. There is a canal connecting Rio Negro and the Orinoco, which is another major river in South America. Many aquatic species try to move between the rivers, but only the toughest can handle the mix of blackwater and clearwater sections in that canal. There's a unique creek in Wyoming that drains both into the Pacific and the Atlantic Oceans. It begins high up in the Teton Range and later splits into two branches. The Pacific Creek joins the larger Snake River, which merges with the Columbia River and finally reaches the Pacific Ocean. The Atlantic Creek heads east and flows into the Yellowstone, Missouri, and Mississippi rivers and eventually empties into the Gulf of Mexico. If you connect the two creeks' watersheds on a map, you'll get a single blue line between Oregon and Louisiana. Explorers who were looking for the Northwest Passage between the two oceans never knew they could have used the creek. They would just need really tiny boats. Some scientists believe that cutthroat trout knew about this route long before people. They managed to migrate from the Snake River to the Yellowstone River, most likely using the two-ocean creek. Now, every summer, the Caño Cristales in Colombia turns into a liquid rainbow, or the River of Five Colors. At this time, and until the end of fall, the conditions are just perfect for the riverbed to turn bright red, yellow, green, blue, and black. You gotta thank certain aquatic plants growing in the river, a special type of seaweed for all this beauty. During the wet season, the river moves fast, and the sun cannot get to these plants. When the dry season hits, there isn't enough water to feed them. So, the time in between the seasons has the perfect conditions for this colorful show. No other place in the world has anything similar. So, at some point, the number of tourists who wanted to see it became so huge that scientists got concerned it could be bad for this hotspot of biodiversity. The area is home to rare species of animals, birds, and plants. Now, there are ecotourism trails and strict opening hours for visitors. That's it for today. So hey, if you pacified your curiosity, then give the video a like and share it with your friends. Or if you want more, just click on these videos and stay on the bright side.